You don't know me, nobody does. And that's exactly how I've kept myself alive. That was the last thing Lily Carter told herself before the crash changed everything. One frozen night, one stranger trapped under 500 pounds of steel, one invisible girl who had spent years making sure nobody ever looked at her twice. And suddenly, she was the only person standing between a woman and death. She had every reason to walk away. She ran toward it anyway. This story moves you. Please subscribe to our channel and follow Lily's journey all the way to the end. Leave a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The bridge smelled like wet concrete and motor oil, and something else, the specific, hollow smell of a place where people go when they have nowhere left to go. Lily Carter knew that smell better than she knew almost anything else in the world. She had been breathing it off and on for 3 years. She was 19 years old. She weighed 112 pounds. She owned one backpack, 2 pairs of socks, broken zipper on her jacket, 3 rules that had kept her breathing since she aged out of the foster system at 18 with $40 and a trash bag full of belongings that didn't even fill the bag. Rule 1, never get involved in other people's problems. Rule 2, never be noticed. Rule 3, never depend on anyone. 3 rules. Simple, clean, effective. She had held on to those rules the way other people held on to family, the way other people held on to hope. For Lily, the rules were better than hope because hope had failed her too many times to count, and the rules had not failed her once. Not once until tonight. The rain had been coming down since 4 in the afternoon, and it was the kind of Portland rain that doesn't fall so much as it presses a cold, steady weight that seeps through everything, finds every gap in every layer, and reminds you, quiet cruelty, that the city does not care whether you live or die. Lily had found her spot under the I-205 overpass 2 hours before the worst of it hit. She had arranged her cardboard carefully, 3 sheets thick on the ground, 1 leaned against the concrete pillar at her back, and she had her sleeping bag unrolled, her backpack tucked between her body and the pillar where no one could grab it without waking her. She had been working on the last half of a gas station sandwich that she'd bought 6 hours ago with change she'd saved from 3 days of small errands. She was almost comfortable. Almost. The wind picked up, and somewhere above her, a traffic light swung on its cable and made a sound like something groaning under pressure. Lily pulled her hood tighter and chewed and told herself that tomorrow she would find a way into the overnight shelter on Morrison, even though the shelter had a waiting list and a case manager named Gerald who smelled like cigarettes and always looked at her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be helped. She didn't need Gerald to help her. She didn't need anyone. She was almost asleep when she heard it. The sound hit her before she understood what it was, a scream of tires. First, that high-pitched shriek of rubber losing its argument with wet asphalt, and then something deeper, something she felt in her chest before she heard it with her ears, the crash. Metal on metal, steel on concrete, a sound like the world breaking open. Lily was on her feet before she made a conscious decision to stand. That was survival instinct, the same instinct that had gotten her out of bad foster homes in the middle of the night, that had moved her feet down dark streets when something told her to run. Body moved first, and her brain caught up second. She pressed herself against the pillar and looked out from under the bridge. On the road above, she could see the reflection of something burning, not flames exactly, but the orange-yellow pulse of a motorcycle's running lights spinning against the wet pavement. Something had gone wrong up there, something big. Rule 1, her brain said, never get involved. She listened. 30 seconds passed. She heard nothing except rain, and the distant sound of a car horn somewhere, and the wind moving through the bridge cables overhead. Then she heard it, a voice low, female, barely above a whisper. Help, please, somebody help me. The voice was not panicked. That was what stopped Lily cold. Panicked, she could have ignored. Panicked was adrenaline. It was noise. It was chaos. And chaos was the thing she had learned to disappear from. This voice was not panicked. This voice was controlled, even through obvious pain. And that meant the person using it had been trained or had experienced enough in their life to stay calm while everything fell apart around them. Lily understood that voice. She had used that voice herself, in places she didn't let herself think about anymore. She grabbed her backpack. Rule 1, she reminded herself. She took 3 steps toward the road. Rule 2, she added, never be noticed. She walked faster. Rule 3, never depend on anyone, which means nobody should depend on you. Which means you should turn around right now, Lily. You should turn around and go back to your cardboard and finish your sandwich and get some sleep and mind on your own business, because this is not your problem, and helping people always comes with a price. And you know that you have always known that the price is always higher than anything you can afford. She came around the corner of the access ramp and saw the motorcycle. It was a massive thing, a full-sized Harley, the kind that weighs close to 800 pounds fully loaded, and it was on its side across the shoulder of the road, and beneath it, partially visible, was a woman. Lily could see one arm, outstretched, fingers pressing flat against the wet asphalt. She could see the woman's head and one shoulder. Everything else was under the machine. The motorcycle's engine was still ticking, cooling metal contracting in the rain, and somewhere in the dark beneath the wreckage, the woman made a sound, not a cry, not a scream, just a low controlled exhale, and said, again, quietly, anyone there? Lily stopped 10 feet away and stared. The woman was wearing leather, a vest cut, in biker terminology, though Lily didn't know the word, and on the back of that vest, even partially crushed against the ground, Lily could make out a patch. She couldn't read all of it in the dark and the rain, but she could make out the central image, skull with wings, and beneath it in letters she could just barely see, Hell's Angels. Every cell in Lily's body told her to back up slowly, to not run because running attracted attention, but to move away with purpose and disappear into the dark, and never let her face be visible, and never let anyone from that organization know she had been within a mile of this road tonight. She had grown up in Portland. She knew exactly what those 3 words meant. She knew the stories. She knew the reputation. She backed up one step. Then the woman turned her head. In the flat, gray light coming off the road, Lily saw her face. She was older, 60 maybe, or close to it. Her gray hair was matted against her cheek from the rain. The side of her face had a cut across it, bleeding steadily, and her jaw was set with a specific tightness of someone holding back pain through sheer will. But what made Lily stop retreating, what rooted her feet to the ground and held her, there was the woman's eyes. She was looking directly at Lily, not through her, not past her, at her. She said clearly, without panic, I can see you, honey. I know you're scared. So am I. Lily did not move. The woman's fingers pressed harder against the pavement. Breathing was shallow. Lily could see the effort in her chest, the way each inhale cost her something. She said, I can't feel my left leg. I don't know if that's good or bad, and I'm choosing to believe it's good. But this bike is too heavy, and I don't have enough left to move it myself. I need help. I don't have a phone, Lily heard herself say. She hadn't made a decision to speak. The words were just there. Neither do I, the woman said. My phone went somewhere over that guardrail about 10 seconds before I did. So it's just us. I can't move a motorcycle, Lily said. That thing weighs 840 pounds. Give or take, the woman said. Stock weight. I know because I bought her 12 years ago, and I have loved her every single day, which makes what happened tonight a personal insult, and I intend to be very angry about it once I'm not pinned under her. But right now, I need you to help me think of a way. Something about the calm in that voice, the way the woman was actively problem-solving while bleeding into a wet road with a motorcycle on her body, did something to Lily's chest. Cracked something open, just a little. Not enough to be dangerous, just enough. She stepped forward. She looked at the motorcycle. She looked at the angle of it, the way it had fallen, the distribution of the weight. She had spent enough time in enough places, watching enough people fix enough things, to understand something about leverage without ever having learned the word in a classroom. I need something, she said. Something long, strong, metal. There's a toolbox, the woman said, attached to the left saddlebag. If you can reach it. Lily moved around the front of the motorcycle, staying low. The engine ticked. The rain hit the metal and scattered in all directions. She found the saddlebag and found the toolbox and opened it with hands that were starting to shake, not from fear exactly, but from cold, from the specific cold of a wet Portland night in March with no proper jacket. The toolbox had a wrench, 2 of them, and a length of metal tubing telescoping, the kind used for mechanical advantage, that someone had wedged in beside the tools. Lily held it up. Found something, she said. What is it? Metal pipe, maybe 2 feet. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, and Lily could see her thinking. When she opened them again, she said, "The frame. On the left side, closest to the ground. There should be a spot where you can get the pipe underneath and use that concrete lip as a fulcrum, like a lever." "Do you know what a lever is?" "Yes," Lily said. "I'm not stupid." "I know you're not," the woman said immediately. "I can tell that just by looking at you." "I'm sorry. I'm not at my best tonight." Lily found the spot. She positioned the pipe. She looked at the distance and the angle and did math she had never been taught how to do but understood anyway. The way she understood most things, through necessity, through trial and error, through needing something to work and making it work. She pressed down on the end of the pipe. Nothing happened. She pressed harder. The motorcycle shifted, half an inch maybe. The woman made a sound, sharp, involuntary, and then controlled it immediately. "Don't stop," she said. "Keep going. A little more. I can pull." "You pull and you'll hurt yourself worse." "Honey," the woman said, with an edge in her voice that was somehow both gentle and absolute, "I have been hurt worse than this. Keep pushing." Lily adjusted her grip. She planted her feet. She used every pound she had, all 112 of them, and she pushed down on that pipe with everything in her, every cold, tired, angry, hungry molecule of herself, and the motorcycle lifted. Not much, 6 inches, maybe 8, but the woman moved. Faster than Lily would have thought possible for someone who had been pinned and was bleeding. She dragged herself sideways across the wet road, and Lily held the pipe until the woman's legs were clear, and then the motorcycle came back down with a sound like a gunshot. Lily stood there, breathing. The woman lay on her back on the wet road, looking up at the rain, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the woman said, "There it is." "Are you okay?" Lily asked. "Ask me that again in about 20 minutes. A pause. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily." The woman seemed to taste the word. "I'm Victoria, and I have never in my life been so happy to meet someone." Lily crouched down. She looked at the cut on Victoria's face, at the way her leg was positioned. She looked at the blood. There was a lot of it coming from somewhere above Victoria's hip, soaking through the leather in a way that meant it wasn't stopping on its own. She looked at her jacket. Her one jacket, her only jacket. She had gotten it from a donation bin 8 months ago, and it had been the best thing she owned. It was warm and waterproof and had a hood that actually stayed up, and she had protected it the way other people protected valuables, because for her it was a valuable. Survival. She unzipped it. "What are you doing?" Victoria said. "You're bleeding too much," Lily said, "and it's not stopping." "Lily, don't. It's a jacket," Lily said, and she said it with a flatness that stopped talking, and Victoria, who clearly understood authority even from people you wouldn't expect it from, stopped talking. Lily tore the lining out of the jacket. She worked fast, efficiently, with the kind of focus she'd learned from doing hard things alone in dark places. She folded the material and pressed it against the wound and put Victoria's hand on top of it. "Hold that," she said. "Hard, don't let go." "Yes, ma'am," Victoria said quietly. Somewhere in the distance, there were sirens. Someone had called. From somewhere, a driver on the overpass maybe, or someone in the neighborhood nearby who'd heard the crash. The sirens were moving closer. "That'll be someone," Victoria said. "Stay, tell them what happened." "I should go," Lily said. "Please don't." "I should go," Lily said again. "I shouldn't be. It's better if I'm not here when they—" "Lily." Victoria reached out and caught Lily's wrist. Grip, even now, even like this, was surprisingly strong. "Please." Lily looked at Victoria's hand on her wrist. She looked at it for a long moment. She could feel the warmth of that grip through her own cold skin, and something happened in her chest that she didn't have words for, something that was almost pain, but different from pain. Something that hadn't happened in a long time. 5 minutes, Lily said. 5 minutes, Victoria agreed. The paramedics arrived in 4. And when they did, when the lights hit and the voices came, and the boots were hitting pavement, and someone was calling out for equipment, and someone else was crouching beside Victoria, Lily took her backpack and her ruined jacket, and she walked backward, one step at a time, into the dark. Victoria turned her head at the last second. Their eyes met. Victoria's lips moved, without sound, forming 2 words. "Thank you." Lily turned. She walked into the dark under the bridge, past her cardboard and her sleeping bag and her unfinished sandwich. She kept walking. She told herself it was over. She told herself she would never see that woman again. She told herself she had broken Rule 1 and Rule 2 and broken them badly, and what she needed to do now was get out of this neighborhood before anything connected her to what had just happened. And she needed to forget Victoria Caldwell's face. She needed to forget the weight of that hand on her wrist. And she needed to remember that people didn't give you kindness without a price. And that was the truth. That had always been the truth. That would always be the truth. She walked for 6 blocks before she realized she was crying. She hadn't cried in almost 2 years. She stopped in a doorway and leaned against the wall and pressed the back of her wrist against her mouth and made herself stop. The way she had learned to make herself stop everything by going very still and very cold inside until the feeling had nowhere left to go. Then she straightened. She checked her backpack straps. She started walking again. 3 miles east, she found a covered bus stop and settled into the corner of it and pulled her knees up and told herself she would sleep. Told herself she was fine. Told herself this was just another night in a long series of nights that would eventually add up to something, although she had stopped being specific about what that something was. She was nearly asleep when her brain, with the specific cruelty of brains at 2 in the morning, showed her Victoria's face again. The cut across her cheek, the controlled breathing, the grip on her wrist. "I can see you, honey." Lily pressed her forehead against her knees. Nobody saw her. Nobody had seen her in years. It was safer that way. She repeated that to herself until the words stopped meaning anything, until they were just sound, until she slept. What she didn't know, couldn't have known, wouldn't have believed if someone had told her was that on the other side of the city, in a hospital room where a team of doctors were working on Victoria Caldwell's injuries, the first thing Victoria said when she regained full consciousness was not a question about herself. It was a name. Lily, she said, to no one in particular, to the ceiling of the room, to the nurse who was checking her IV and looked up in confusion. "Her name is Lily. Somebody find her." And the nurse didn't know what that meant. But the man standing in the doorway, a broad, silver-haired man in a leather vest who had followed the ambulance to the hospital and had been standing in that doorway for the last 3 hours, heard every word. Stepped into the hallway. He pulled out his phone. He made a call that would ripple out across the entire city of Portland. Lily had walked 6 blocks and cried and stopped crying and told herself it was over. She had no idea that at that exact moment, the search for her had already begun. She had no idea that the woman she had saved was loved deeply, completely, fiercely, loved by an organization that protected its own with a loyalty that most people couldn't imagine. She had no idea that by morning, more than 40 men and women would be moving through the streets of Portland looking for a 19-year-old homeless girl with a broken backpack and no jacket. She had no idea. And that was the problem. Because Lily Carter had spent 3 years learning how to disappear. And when the people of the Hells Angels began looking for her, when the descriptions went out and the routes were divided and the search began in earnest, Lily thought they were hunting her. She thought she had done something wrong. She thought they were coming to punish her. So she ran. She woke up at 5:30 in the morning with that instinct she had relied on for years, the one that had no logic to it, that was pure ancient animal sense, and she felt it loud and clear. Move now. Go. She was on her feet in seconds, backpack on. Gone. She didn't know what she was running from, but she ran anyway. She ran like someone who had spent her whole life learning that when you're invisible and something powerful starts looking for you, the looking is never about love. She had never been wrong about that. Not once. She was wrong now. But she wouldn't know that for 3 more days. 3 days during which Victoria Caldwell would refuse to eat properly, would argue with her doctors, would send message after message through channels Lily couldn't even imagine, all centered on the same question: where is the girl? Where is Lily? 3 days during which Lily would stay off her usual routes, would sleep in new places, would ration the last of her money with the careful precision of someone who had calculated survival margins before and knew exactly how thin you could stretch them. 3 days during which 2 worlds, one completely invisible, one built on loyalty and power and brotherhood, moved on a collision course toward each other. Neither one ready for what would happen when they met. Portland had seen a lot of things, but it had never seen anything like what was coming next. Lily ran, and something followed, not the thing she feared, something she had no category for, something she had no word for. The closest word, the only word, was one she had stopped believing in a long time ago. Family. She had $73.40. She had counted it twice. In the dark of a gas station bathroom, with water dripping from the faucet she'd run over her hands to get some feeling back into them. 73.40. She had calculated, with the flat precision of someone who had done this math before, that she could stretch it to 9 days if she was careful. 7, if the weather stayed cold and she had to buy another layer somewhere. She gave herself until morning to get out of the neighborhood. Then she gave herself until the next neighborhood. Then the one after that. She moved in the way she had always moved, not running, because running made you visible, but walking fast, head down, back tight against her spine, eyes moving. She had no idea where she was going. She just knew she had to go. The thing about Portland was that it wasn't a small city, but it wasn't big enough to truly disappear in either. It was a city of neighborhoods, each one its own ecosystem, each one with its own eyes. 3 years on these streets had taught Lily which eyes noticed her and which ones looked right through her. She had cultivated the art of being invisible so completely that she sometimes startles herself befremstående samat simapom and not immediately recognizing the person looking back. Had always felt like an achievement. This moving east along Burnside with her chin tucked against the cold, it felt like armor. She didn't know who was looking for her yet. She didn't know how many of them there were. She didn't know that at 7:42 that morning, a man named Marcus Carter had walked into the hospital room where Victoria lay with a stabilized leg fracture and a bandaged face and 3 cracked ribs, and had leaned in close and had listened to everything Victoria had to say. She didn't know any of that. What she knew was that she had been at a crash site. She had touched the woman. She had left DNA, fingerprints, fiber evidence. She had been seen, and being seen in Lily's world was the beginning of every bad thing that had ever happened to her. She turned off Burnside. She kept walking. Inside the hospital, Marcus Carter was a man who rarely sat down in rooms where decisions were being made, because he found that standing gave him a clearer view of everything. Stood now beside Victoria's bed with his arms folded and his face arranged in the expression his old lady had once described as his listening face, which meant jaw set, eyes still, every piece of his attention focused on the person speaking. Victoria was speaking. She was alone, Victoria said. She came from under the bridge. She didn't have a phone. She didn't have anything. She had that jacket, the one she tore up for me, and from the look of it, Marcus, that jacket was everything she had. Okay, Marcus said. She ran the moment the paramedics got there. She didn't want to be seen. Victoria paused. She was watching him carefully, reading him the way she had always been able to read him, through the stillness, through the wall, into whatever was actually happening underneath. She was scared, not of me, of the situation, of being noticed. Okay, Marcus said again. She's homeless, Marcus. He nodded once, and she saved my life, I know. Then why are you just standing there saying, okay, like I'm giving you a weather report? Marcus unfolded his arms. He looked at his wife, at the cut on her face, at the way she was holding herself against the pain she was refusing to fully acknowledge, the absolute iron in her jaw that had been there the first day he met her and had been there every day since, and would be there, he suspected, until one of them was gone from this world. He said quietly, "'Cause I've already made the call. We're already looking." Victoria exhaled. Something in her shoulders dropped just slightly. "How many?" she said. "Enough," Marcus said. That was the truth. By 9 o'clock that morning, 43 members of their Portland chapter, along with 6 from the chapter in Eugene who'd heard about the crash, were moving through the streets. Not in a way that would frighten anyone, not in a convoy they knew better than that. They were smarter than the reputation that preceded them, but quietly, in pairs and small groups, covering the neighborhoods where someone might go if they were young and alone and had no fixed address. They had a name, Lily. They had a description from Victoria, given with the clarity of a woman who had looked very hard at the person in front of her and stored the information with intention. Young, slight dark hair, wet, tangled, old backpack, brown or olive green. No jacket by the time the paramedics arrived because she'd torn it apart and left the pieces behind. That last detail, the jacket, was what Marcus kept coming back to, because that wasn't nothing. That wasn't a person who had helped and walked away unchanged. That was a person who had given the only real thing they had. He wanted to find her. He was going to find her. He didn't say any of that to Victoria because Victoria already knew it, and saying things Victoria already knew was a waste of breath. She told me her name, Victoria said. Just her first name. She said it like it was the only thing she was sure was still hers. Marcus picked up his jacket. He looked at his wife once more. I'll find her, he said. I know, Victoria said. When you do, Marcus. He stopped. When you do, don't send someone else. Go yourself. Because she's going to be scared and she's going to want to run. And if she sees a stranger come up to her talking about Hell's Angels, she is going to bolt so fast, you won't even see which direction she went. What would you suggest? Victoria looked at him steadily. Tell her I'm alive. Lead with that. Everything else comes after. Lily had made it 3 miles east by 10 in the morning. She hadn't eaten yet. She didn't feel hungry, which was a lie her body told her when it was too busy being afraid to bother with anything as pedestrian as hunger. She stopped at a convenience store and bought a bottle of water and a granola bar with exact change, and she ate the granola bar outside on a bench, watching the street in both directions while she chewed. She was trying to think clearly, trying to organize what she knew. What she knew was this: she had been at a Hell's Angels crash site. She had physically touched and moved a motorcycle belonging to the club. She had been seen by the victim herself, who had been conscious and coherent, and the victim was now either dead or alive, and Lily had no way of knowing which. If the woman was dead, the people looking for Lily would be looking for someone to blame. If the woman was alive, they might still be looking for someone to blame, because people like that didn't live by the same rules as the rest of the world. And she, Lily, was a nobody, invisible girl without an address or a phone or a person in the world who would notice if she disappeared, and that meant she was easy. She was easy to blame and easy to make disappear. That was the logic that moved her feet. What she didn't factor in, what she couldn't have factored in, because she had no experience with it, was loyalty. Not the transactional kind, not the kind that meant I'll help you if it helps me too, but the deep, irrational, total kind. The kind that makes people get up before sunrise and spend their day walking streets in the rain because someone they love says a name once and means it. Lily had never experienced that kind of loyalty. She didn't know it existed. She turned down a side street. She found a spot near a laundromat, warm air coming through the dryer vent on the side of the building, and she settled against the wall and tried to decide whether to keep moving or stay put. She decided to stay. Moving in daylight was too visible. She was wrong, because staying put was exactly how, at 11:17 that morning, a woman named Carla found her. Carla was 51 years old, had been riding with the club for 20 years, and had a face that had never, in those 20 years, learned how to look anything other than exactly what it was, which was direct. She came around the corner of the laundromat, and she saw Lily against the wall, and for a half second she hesitated, because Victoria had said slight, and Victoria had said young, but Victoria hadn't said quite how young the girl would look. Sitting against a wall, with her knees pulled up and her eyes moving to every possible exit the moment Carla came into view. Lily was on her feet immediately. I don't want any trouble, Lily said. Her voice was flat and even and entirely controlled, which Carla recognized as the voice of someone who was anything but controlled on the inside. I'm not trouble, Carla said. She stopped moving. She put her hands out open, visible in the way you'd approach someone who had the look of an animal that had been cornered too many times. My name is Carla. I'm looking for someone named Lily. The girl's face did something complicated. It didn't go blank, it went the opposite of blank. Everything in it sharpened, tightened, became very still, and in that stillness, Carla saw something that made her chest hurt. She saw a person doing the calculation, running the numbers, trying to figure out how much danger she was in which direction she could go fastest. Don't know anyone named Lily, the girl said. Okay, Carla said. That's fair, she didn't move. Can I just tell you one thing? Just one thing, and then if you want me to walk away, I'll walk away. The girl said nothing, but she didn't run, which Carla decided to count. The woman from last night, Carla said. The one under the motorcycle. Victoria Caldwell. She watched the girl's face. There a flicker. Just for a second, she's alive. She came through surgery this morning, and she woke up, and the first thing she said, the very first thing, was your name. The stillness in the girl's face cracked, just slightly, like a hairline fracture in glass. She said your name, Carla said again, more quietly. She said, Lily, and she asked us to find you. Why? The girl said. Wasn't a question quite. It was a word she released carefully, like she knew something was inside it that might hurt her. Because she wants to thank you, Carla said. Because you saved her life. Because you tore up your own jacket to stop her from bleeding out on that road. And she's the kind of woman who doesn't take that lightly. None of us do. The girl looked at Carla for a long time. Carla let her look. Let her do whatever calculations she needed to do. And then the girl said, very quietly, how do I know you're not here to hurt me? You don't, Carla said. And I'm not going to pretend that's not a reasonable thing to worry about. I'm a stranger. I'm associated with something that scares people. I get that. She paused. But I came alone. I haven't called anyone else. I'm standing here with my hands where you can see them because I want you to know that you can run if you decide you need to. Not going to chase you. Another long silence. The dryer vent breathed warm air between them. She really said my name, the girl said. It was the first thing out of her mouth when she came back around. Carla said, her husband and Marcus is not a soft man. I want to be clear about that. Marcus Carter stood there and watched his wife come out of anesthesia saying a stranger's name, and he already had people looking before Victoria finished the sentence. The girl's jaw moved. She was pressing her back teeth together. Carla could tell the way people do when they're trying not to feel something they're very much feeling. That's not how it works, the girl said. What isn't? People don't do that. You don't wake up and say someone's name. You don't send people out looking for a homeless girl you talked to for 5 minutes in the rain. Doesn't happen. It happened, Carla said simply. Why would you even? The girl stopped herself. She looked away, down the street, then back. Didn't do anything that anyone else wouldn't have done. Then where is everyone else who stopped? Carla said. The girl had nothing to say to that. The silence that followed was the loudest thing on the block. I can take you to her, Carla said. Or I can give you the hospital name, and you can go on your own terms whenever you're ready. Or I can give you my number if you have a phone, and you can decide later. Whatever you need. We're not trying to corner you. Don't have a phone, the girl said. I know. Carla reached into her jacket and pulled out a piece of paper. On it was written the name of the hospital, a room number, and a phone number. She set it on the wall beside the girl, not handing it to her, not requiring her to take it, just leaving it in the space between them. That's the room she's in, and that's my number. The nurses know Victoria is expecting a visitor named Lily. No ID required, no questions asked. She took a step back. I'm going to walk away now, Carla said, like I said I would. She turned. She made it 3 steps before she heard the girl's voice behind her. Is she in a lot of pain? Carla turned back. The girl was looking at the piece of paper on the wall. Yeah, Carla said honestly. She is, but she's tough. She's the toughest person I've ever known, and I've known some tough people. Good, the girl said, and then, quieter, I mean not good that she's in pain. Good that she's tough. I know what you meant, Carla said. She walked away. She didn't look back. She had learned a long time ago that looking back communicated the wrong thing. It said I'm checking on you, which said I don't trust you, which said I'm not going to give you the space I just said I was going to give you. Carla had raised 2 kids and ridden enough miles to know that the only way to give someone the choice to trust you was to actually give them the choice. She got to the end of the block and turned the corner. Then she stopped, leaned against the wall, and let out a breath that she had been holding for approximately 15 minutes. She got out her phone and texted Marcus, found her, gave her the info, her call now. His response came back in less than 30 seconds. Copy. Tell everyone to stand down. Let her breathe. Back around the corner, Lily was still standing against the wall of the laundromat. She looked at the piece of paper for a long time. She picked it up. She turned it over blank on the back. She held it in both hands like it was something that might either save her or burn her. And she stood there in the warm breath of the dryer vent and fought with herself in complete silence. She wanted to throw it away. Every version of her that had learned to survive was telling her to throw it away and keep moving. She wanted to go. The other version of her, the smaller, quieter version, the one she had spent 3 years up covering over with rules and distance and controlled breathing, that version was saying something else entirely. She folded the paper. She put it in her front pocket, closest to her skin. She started walking, not east, not away, west, toward the hospital. She stopped twice in the first block and turned around and walked back the direction she had come, and then stopped again and stood on the sidewalk with people moving around her and argued with herself in the intense, voiceless way of someone who has spent years keeping every important conversation entirely internal. She said to herself all the things she always said to herself. She reminded herself of all the times she had trusted someone and what had happened. She listed them. She was very thorough. Then she thought about Victoria's hand on her wrist, the warmth of it, the grip that was not desperate, not demanding, just present, just there. She thought about the words she hadn't let herself replay until now. I can see you, honey. She walked west. She got to the hospital at 12:43. She stood outside the entrance for 11 minutes. She watched people go in and out. She noticed the security desk inside the lobby and identified the two people staffing it and noted that neither of them was watching the door with any particular attention. She identified the elevator bank and calculated the fastest route to the stairs in case she needed to leave fast. Then she walked in. The woman at the desk looked up. Lily said very quietly, "I'm here to see Victoria Caldwell." "The nurse knows. Room 4 East," the woman said immediately. Not checking any paperwork, not asking for ID, just answering as if she'd been briefed, as if someone had made absolutely sure this particular visitor would have no friction at all. 4th floor, turn left out of the elevator. Lily stared at her for a moment. "Thank you," she said. She took the stairs, old habit. Standing outside room 4 East, Lily could hear a television on low, and the particular silence of a hospital room, a silence that wasn't really silent, that had a texture to it, made up of monitors and ventilation, and the soft sounds of someone managing pain carefully. She stood at the door with her hand 6 inches from the handle and thought about leaving. She thought about it seriously, specifically, the way she thought about everything running the scenario, calculating the cost. Then she heard Victoria's voice, clearly from inside the room, either "Come in or go home, honey. That draft from the hallway is cold, and these ribs are not what they used to be." Lily's hand dropped. She opened the door. Victoria looked worse than she had in the rain. That was the first thing Lily registered, and she registered it as information rather than emotion, the way she registered most things. The cut on Victoria's face had been cleaned and butterfly taped. There was bruising deep purple along her jaw, under her eye, across her collarbone where the strap had hit her. Her left leg was elevated. There were 2 IV lines and a monitor and a blood pressure cuff and all the paraphernalia of a body that had been through something it shouldn't have been through. But her eyes were the same, exactly the same, lit, present, focused on Lily the way almost nobody ever focused on Lily. "You came," Victoria said. "I almost didn't," Lily said. "I know." Victoria gestured at the chair beside the bed. "Sit down before you fall down. You look like you haven't slept." "I slept some." "You look like you haven't eaten." "I ate something." "What?" "A granola bar." "When?" Lily paused. "This morning." "It is now 1 in the afternoon," Victoria said. "Sit down." She reached for the call button and pressed it before Lily could object. And when the nurse appeared in the doorway a moment later, Victoria said pleasantly but with absolute finality, "Can you please have them send up 2 of whatever the lunch option is today? My niece just arrived and she hasn't eaten." The nurse looked at Lily, who was not Victoria's niece, and who she had probably been briefed about, and said, "Of course, Mrs. Caldwell," and disappeared. Lily sat down. She sat in the chair beside the bed and put her backpack between her feet and looked at Victoria and said, "I'm not your niece." "No," Victoria agreed. "But hospitals have rules about guests, and rules are easier to manage when you understand which ones matter and which ones are just suggestions." She paused. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Lily said. The answer was automatic, effortless, completely unconvincing. "Right," Victoria said. She looked at Lily with a steadiness that was not intrusive. She wasn't pressing, wasn't demanding, wasn't asking to be let through the wall. She was just looking, just being present with what she saw and thinking about you since last night. Since before the surgery, while they were prepping me, I kept thinking I don't even know if she's warm. Lily said nothing. "Are you warm?" Victoria said. "Usually," Lily said. "Not last night. Last night was an unusual night." "You gave me your jacket," Victoria said. Not an accusation. A statement of fact, plain as anything. "It was the only thing I had long enough to use as a compress," Lily said. "It was a practical decision." You tore it apart, Victoria said. You didn't just take it off. You could have used it whole and gotten it back. You tore it up because that was what the situation needed. Lily said nothing. That's not practicality, Victoria said. That's generosity. There's a difference. The food arrived, 2 trays, delivered by an orderly who didn't make eye contact with anyone and retreated quickly. Chicken rice, green beans, apple juice, a roll. Lily looked at it, and something in her face that she hadn't meant to let out slipped past her defenses for just a moment. Eat, Victoria said. Not a suggestion. Lily ate. She ate carefully at first, controlled, and then because she was very hungry, more hungry than she'd been willing to admit, less carefully, sign outside had. And by the time she was halfway through the chicken, she had stopped monitoring herself and was simply eating, which was when she realized Victoria was watching her with an expression that she couldn't quite categorize. Not pity, not condescension, something quieter than that. Something that looked almost like it hurt. How long? Victoria said. Lily set down her fork. How long what? How long have you been on the streets? 3 years, Lily said. And she said it the way she said everything about her life plainly, without decoration, daring the other person to make it into something dramatic. Since you aged out, Victoria said. Lily looked at her. Did you know that? Because you're 19 and you're careful, Victoria said. Careful in a specific way. Not the way you're careful if you made a bad decision and ended up on the street. That's a different kind of careful. Careful the way someone is when they've been navigating systems their whole life and they've learned that the systems fail you and you'd better have a backup. You were in foster care. It was not a question. Lily picked up her fork again. She took a bite of rice. She chewed. She swallowed. Portland, she said. 3 different placements. Were any of them good? A pause. One was okay. What happened to the okay one? She moved, Lily said. Her daughter in Sacramento got sick, and she moved to take care of her. It was the right thing to do. She said that last sentence with the particular quality of someone who has rehearsed it until it no longer hurts, but who has not entirely succeeded. Victoria absorbed that. She didn't try to respond to it, didn't try to fix it, didn't say the things people usually said. She just let it sit between them, which was actually the most respectful thing she could have done with it. I want to ask you something, Victoria said, and I want you to know that whatever your answer is, it doesn't change anything. Lily looked up. Last night, when you heard me, when you were standing there in the dark, deciding what to do, what made you come? What actually made you walk toward me? Lily thought about that. She thought about it honestly, in the way she forced herself to think about things when lying to herself wouldn't serve any purpose. Your voice, she said finally. You weren't panicking. You were scared, but you weren't falling apart. She stopped. Victoria said. I recognized it, Lily said quietly. The way you were talking. Like you'd practiced staying calm in bad situations. Like it wasn't the first time something bad had happened, and you'd figured out that keeping your voice steady was the only thing you had control over. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Something that was not quite pain, but was adjacent to it. Talked that way before, Lily said. In a few places. When I was a kid, she looked down at her tray. When your voice is the only thing you can control, you protect it. The room was very quiet. Yeah, Victoria said after a moment. You do. They sat with that. The monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang and was answered. The afternoon light came through the window at an angle. I need to tell you something, Victoria said, and I need you to hear the whole thing before you react. Can you do that? Lily's hands tightened slightly on the edge of the tray table. Old reflex. She loosened them deliberately. Yeah, my husband is coming this afternoon, Victoria said. Marcus, and he's going to want to meet you. And before you close down and start calculating which direction to leave, I want you to understand something about Marcus. She looked at Lily directly. He is the most loyal person I have ever known. And when someone does something for the people he loves, he does not forget it. He does not shrug it off. He does not write a thank you note and consider the matter settled. Lily was already recalculating exits. She couldn't help it. See you thinking about leaving, Victoria said. Stop. I'm not thinking about. You're absolutely thinking about leaving, Victoria said without heat, and I'm not going to pretend that what I'm asking is small. Asking you to stay in this room and meet a man you have every reason to be wary of. Asking you to trust, just a little bit. I know that's Lily. I know that's not a cheap thing to ask. I know what that costs. Lily said nothing. But I need you to hear this, Victoria said. Whatever happens, whatever you decide, you are not in trouble. You are not in danger. The reason we were looking for you is not because anyone is angry. Because I told Marcus what you did and he said, she paused. She blinked, which was the closest she seemed to come to showing emotion without full control. He said, that girl gave us everything she had. And Marcus doesn't say things like that. The monitor beeped. Lily sat in the chair with her unfinished lunch and her backpack between her feet and 3 years of self-preservation arguing loudly with something smaller and quieter that she could not name. She stayed. At 3:14, the door opened. Marcus Carter was not what Lily had expected, and she had expected something very specific, large, loud, hard-edged, the physical embodiment of everything she associated with the name on that vest. He was large. Yes, he was silver-haired and broad-shouldered, and he moved through the doorway with the particular purposefulness of a man who had spent decades being sure of where he was going. But he stopped just inside the door when he saw her. He looked at her for a moment, not a calculating look, not a threatening look, but the look of a man who was taking in information that meant something to him, filing it away carefully. Then he nodded once, in the direction of the chair where she was sitting. You're Lily, he said. Yeah, she said. He crossed the room. He went to his wife first. He put his hand against her face gently, the touch of a man who had been walking around terrified all day and was only now, seeing her with his own eyes in daylight, beginning to let the fear out. He said something to her too low for Lily to hear. Victoria said something back. He straightened up. He pulled up the second chair and he sat down across from Lily. He was quiet for a moment, not an uncomfortable quiet, just a man who had something to say and was deciding how to say it. I'm going to say thank you, he said finally. But I want you to know that for me, those words don't feel like enough. They feel like a place to start. Lily said, you don't owe me anything. That's not your call, he said, not unkindly, just factually. You saved my wife's life. You gave up something that belonged to you, something you couldn't afford to give to make sure she lived. That means something. That means something that I don't have good enough words for yet, but I'm working on it. Lily looked at him. She was doing the calculations she always did: threat assessment, escape routes, probability matrices. She found, with something that felt like vertigo, that the numbers were not adding up the way they always added up. The math was not coming up dangerous. Why are you looking at me like that? Marcus said. Like what? Like you're trying to figure out the catch, he said. Like you're waiting for the other shoe. Lily said nothing. There's no catch, he said. There's always a catch, she said. Marcus looked at her for a moment. Then very slightly, the corner of his mouth moved. Victoria said, you'd say something like that, he said. Did she? She said you were smart. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. She was right. But being smart doesn't mean every situation is a trap. Sometimes people are just grateful. In my experience, Lily started. I know what your experience is, he said. Or I know enough of it. And your experience is real. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you've been wrong to be careful. If you survived, that matters. But surviving and living are two different things, and I think you know that. The room was so quiet, Lily could hear herself breathe. I'd like to have a conversation, Marcus said. Not today, necessarily. Today I just wanted to see you, to say thank you in person. But I'd like to sit down with you, sometime you, me and Victoria, and talk about what comes next for you. I don't need anything from you, Lily said. She said it without aggression, just as fact. I know you don't need anything from me, he said. I said I want to talk about what comes next. Not what you need from me, what you want for yourself. He paused. Do you know what that is? Lily opened her mouth, closed it. Because the answer she never let herself speak out loud, because speaking it gave it a surface area, made it vulnerable to being taken away. The honest answer was something she had kept wrapped up and silent inside her chest for 3 years. She wanted a room. She wanted something to do with her hands that mattered. She wanted to wake up and know what the day was going to look like. She wanted, and this was the one she guarded most ferociously, the one she never touched, she wanted someone to know her name. Not just her first name, her whole name, and to say it like it was worth something. She sat across from Marcus Carter in a hospital room in Portland and did not say any of that. Something in her face must have moved, because he looked at her with the specific gentleness of a man who had seen a lot of things and knew when someone was carrying something heavy, and he said, "Take your time. We're not going anywhere." And for reasons she could not entirely explain, reasons that had something to do with Victoria's hand on her wrist in the rain, and Carla's open hands in the alley, granola bar at noon that she'd eaten alone because she always ate alone. Lily felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. She felt, in some small and terrifying way, like she might actually be somewhere that would still exist tomorrow. She pressed her back teeth together. She breathed. She looked Marcus Carter in the eye and said nothing because she didn't have words yet. But she didn't leave, and that was everything. She stayed at the hospital for 2 hours and 40 minutes. She knew the exact amount of time because she had watched the clock on the wall above the door the entire time, not anxiously, just the way she always tracked time, the way you do when you've learned that knowing exactly where you are in a day is the only map you have. Marcus had stayed for 40 minutes and then stood up and said he had to take care of something. And he said it the way men like him said things, briefly, without elaboration, without asking if that was okay. Paused at the door and looked back at Lily and said, "I'd like to talk again, when you're ready." And then he was gone, and the room felt both smaller and less pressurized at the same time. After that, it was just Lily and Victoria, and the afternoon light moving across the floor, and the monitor doing its slow, steady work. They talked. Not about heavy things. Victoria seemed to understand instinctively that Lily had a weight limit on heavy things for one day, and she didn't push past it. She asked Lily small questions: where she'd grown up, which parts of Portland she knew best, whether she'd ever been to the coast. And Lily answered in the measured way she answered everything, doling out information carefully. But and this surprised her, she answered. She didn't deflect, didn't give the non-answers she'd gotten so good at giving. She actually talked, and the experience was strange enough that she caught herself noticing it, which made it stranger. Victoria told her things too, about Marcus, about how they'd met, a story involving a broken-down truck and a very bad country song on the radio, and a diner that no longer existed, told with the dry humor of someone who had told it enough times to know exactly which details to keep. About the club, not as an organization, not as the thing Lily feared it was, but as a collection of people, specific, imperfect, complicated people who had found each other through a shared language of engines and road and loyalty. "People think they know us," Victoria said. "They see the vest, and they've already written the whole story." "Did that," Lily said. "I know you did. Last night under the bridge when I heard the crash and I saw the patch." Lily paused. "I almost kept walking. What stopped you?" Victoria said. She already knew the answer, or part of it, but she was asking again, and Lily understood she was asking because the answer the second time, in daylight, food in her stomach, and warmth around her, might be different than the answer in the rain. "You said you were scared," Lily said. "You said so am I. And I thought I don't know." Thought nobody admits that. Victoria looked at her. No, not like that, not just plainly, like it was just a fact and it was okay for it to be true. Lily looked at her hands. "People usually try to hide it, or they use it to manipulate you. I'm scared as a way to make you do something." She paused. "You just said it like it was information." "It was information," Victoria said simply. "Yeah," Lily said, "I know. That's why I stayed." When Lily left, she said goodbye with the particular care she gave to things she wasn't sure she'd see again. She stood at the door and looked at Victoria in the bed and said, "I hope you feel better," which was inadequate but true. "Come back," Victoria said. "Not a question." "I'll think about it," Lily said. "That's more than I expected," Victoria said. "I'll take it." Lily took the stairs down and walked through the lobby and out the door and stood on the sidewalk and breathed the cold air and thought about what had just happened inside that building. She thought about Marcus Carter's hands on his knees, leaning forward, asking her what she wanted for herself. She thought about the way he'd looked at her when she didn't answer, not with impatience, not with pity, just with a kind of patient waiting that she didn't have a category for. She thought about Victoria's voice in the dark. She thought about Carla's open hands. She stood on the sidewalk for a full 3 minutes. People moved around her, through her, the way they always did. Then she started walking north. The next 3 days were both completely ordinary and quietly extraordinary, in the way that things are when something has shifted, but you haven't yet admitted to yourself that it has. Lily kept her usual patterns. She moved through the city the way she always moved, found her food where she always found it, slept in covered spots she'd identified over 3 years of necessity. Something was different in the texture of it. Something had changed in the interior weather of being Lily Carter. She kept the piece of paper in her front pocket. She didn't call the number on it. She told herself she wasn't going to. The second day, she passed a coffee shop with a heating vent she sometimes used on cold mornings, and she was standing near it, warming her hands, when two men from the club passed on the other side of the street. She recognized the vests. Her body tensed before her brain caught up, the old reflex firing danger. Move, go, and then something new happened. She watched them. They were talking to each other, carrying coffee cups, laughing at something one of them had said. They looked like two people having a regular morning. They turned down a side street and were gone. Lily stood at the vent and thought about that for a long time. The third day, she called the number. She used the phone at the library on Belmont, the one at the end of the row that was partially blocked by a shelving unit and that she had used before when she needed to make calls she didn't want anyone nearby to overhear. She dialed the number from memory because she had memorized it without intending to, the same way she memorized things that mattered involuntarily, completely. Carla picked up on the second ring. "This is Lily," Lily said. Beat of silence, and then, "Hey, I'm glad you called." "Victoria said to come back," Lily said. "I want to, but not to the hospital." "She's being discharged tomorrow," Carla said. "She'll be at home. Marcus has been setting up the house so she can move around easily." A pause. "She'd want to see you whenever you're ready." "What does that mean?" Lily said. "The home." "The club has a main property," Carla said. "It's where a lot of us spend time. Victoria and Marcus have a house adjacent. It's not what you're probably imagining." "You don't know what I'm imagining," Lily said. "Fair point," Carla said. "But whatever it is, it's probably not right. Would you come? I'll pick you up if you want, so you're not walking in alone." Lily thought about it. "I'll walk in alone," she said. "Tell me where." Carla told her. She wrote the address on the inside of her forearm in pen, the way she noted things she needed to remember without paper. She went the next afternoon. She stood outside for 6 minutes before she went in. She had been standing long enough to notice that the property was quieter than she'd expected. She had expected the sound of engines and the sound of a lot of men. And instead there were maybe a dozen people visible in the yard, some working on bikes, some sitting and talking, one woman hanging something over a railing. It looked like a regular afternoon in a place where people who knew each other well spent time together. She was still running exit strategies when the gate opened and Carla appeared. "You made it," Carla said. "I said I would," Lily said. "I know. But there's a difference between saying something and doing it. I've learned not to conflate the two." She held the gate. "Come in." Lily walked through. The people in the yard noticed her. She felt them notice her, the slight shift of attention, eyes moving her direction. She kept her face neutral and her pace even. And she told herself this was just information. This was just people being aware of a new person in their space. This was a normal human reaction and not a threat. Man near the bikes looked up and nodded at her. She nodded back. He went back to what he was doing. That was it. Carla led her to the house adjacent to the main building and knocked twice and pushed the door open. Victoria was in a chair in the front room, her left leg elevated, a cup of something hot on the table beside her. She looked more like herself here than she had in the hospital. Or maybe what Lily was seeing was Victoria in her own context, in the space that belonged to her. The difference was the difference between a plant in a container and the same plant and ground it had chosen. She looked up when Lily walked in, and she smiled, not a polite smile, not a gracious smile, but something real and immediate that reached her eyes before it reached her mouth. "You came back," Victoria said. "You said to," Lily said. "I say a lot of things. People don't always listen." She gestured at the chair across from her. "Sit, Carla, can you?" "Already on it," Carla said from somewhere behind Lily and disappeared in the direction of what was presumably a kitchen. Lily sat. She put her backpack on the floor between her feet, the way she always did. And then she looked around the room, not nervously, but with the specific attentiveness she brought to new environments. Books on the shelves, photographs on the walls, a child's drawing, framed, slightly crooked. collection of something on the mantelpiece that she couldn't immediately identify. Road pins, Victoria said, following her gaze. From different runs over the years. Marcus has been collecting since before I met him. Don't ask me how many he'll tell you, and the number is genuinely ridiculous. How many? Lily said. 347, Victoria said, as of last month. Which I know because he told me, and I told him I wasn't sure if it was impressive or concerning, and he said, why not both? Something happened in Lily's chest that she almost recognized as wanting to laugh. She pressed it down out of habit, and then deliberately, consciously, in a way she almost never allowed herself, she let it out. Just barely. Just the corner of it. Victoria noticed. She didn't make a thing of it, but she noticed. Carla came back with 2 more cups of coffee and set them down and left again with the particular tact of a person who understood that the fewer bodies in the room, the better for a conversation that needed space. I want to ask you something, Lily said. She had been thinking about how to say this since the day before. I want to be honest about why I'm asking. Go ahead, Victoria said. What is it that Marcus actually wants from this? Lily looked at her directly. Because people like Marcus Carter don't invest in strangers without a reason. Nobody does. And I'm not saying that as an insult. Saying it because I've been trying to understand the logic, and I can't. Victoria set down her cup. She looked at Lily with the steadiness that seemed to be as natural to her as breathing. I'll tell you what I told Marcus the morning after the crash, she said. When he asked me to describe you, I said she came from nowhere, in the worst weather of the year, with nothing to her name. She stopped. Everyone else on that road just kept moving. She stopped. Victoria paused. I said to Marcus, I don't know this girl's story, but I know something about what it costs a person like that to stop. A person who has learned to keep themselves invisible doesn't just break that open for a stranger. Something happens inside them. Something decides. And whatever decided in that girl, I want her to know that it was right. Lily was quiet. Marcus doesn't want anything from you, Victoria said. Neither do I. We want something for you. That's different. And I know you don't have a reason to believe that yet. I know your experience says otherwise. But you asked me to be honest, so I'm being honest. What do you want from me, Lily said. Her voice was carefully level. A room, Victoria said. To start. We have a unit on the property that isn't being used. It's small, 2 rooms, but it's warm and it locks from the inside. No conditions, no expectations. Just a place to be while you figure out what you want next. Lily looked at her. Why? She said. Because you haven't had one, Victoria said. Place that locks from the inside. You've been locking yourself on the inside of your own walls for 3 years because there was nowhere else to do it. That's not a way to live. That's a way to survive. Lily said nothing for a long moment. The coffee was warm in her hands. She could hear distantly voices from the yard. Ordinary sounds. People doing ordinary things. I don't take things for free, she said finally. Don't know how. Then earn it, Victoria said simply. Marcus can find you work. Real work, paid work. There's always something that needs doing around this place, and people who do it well are worth something. But that's later. First, just the room. Just the room, Lily repeated. Just the room, Victoria confirmed. She said yes. She didn't say it immediately. She said it after another 20 minutes of quiet back and forth. After she'd asked the questions, she needed to ask practical questions, specific questions, the kind that said she was taking this seriously and not just reacting from emotion. She asked about the other people on the property, about what was expected of residents, about what no conditions actually meant in practice. She asked about exits, not with those words, but in ways that meant the same thing. And Victoria answered all of it with the same steady directness she brought to everything. The end of it, Lily said, okay. Victoria said, okay. That was how Lily Carter came to sleep in a room with a door that locked from the inside for the first time in 3 years. She didn't sleep well. That was the truth of it. She lay in the narrow bed in the small room and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the building settling and the distant nighttime sounds of the neighborhood and the particular silence of a place that was simply quiet, not dangerous, just quiet. And she didn't sleep well because her body didn't know how to respond to that yet. Body was still calibrated for alert, still listening for the thing that would require her to move. But she stayed. She stayed in the room, and she stayed in the bed, and she watched the ceiling, and she breathed. That was the first night. The second night was slightly better. The third, slightly better than that. She met people incrementally, in the way she did everything carefully, on her own terms, evaluating before engaging. A man named Big Roy, who worked on engines and communicated primarily through grunts and hand gestures, turned out to be, beneath that, a person of considerable patience and dry wit. A woman named Sandra, who managed the property's bookkeeping and who treated Lily, from their first interaction, with the brisk respect of someone who didn't have time for anything other than competence and expected the same in return. Carla, who became a steady presence without ever becoming an intrusive one. Then Marcus, who appeared in her vicinity every few days without making it into an event, who talked to her the way he talked to everyone else on the property directly, without adjustment, as if she was simply a person and not a project. On the fifth day, she found a broken motorcycle near the workshop and she stood looking at it for a while, and then, without asking anyone, she started taking stock of what was wrong with it. She didn't try to fix it. She just looked. Big Roy came out of the workshop at some point and stood beside her and looked at the same thing. Carbs flooded, he said. Timing too, Lily said. He looked at her sidelong. You know bikes some, she said. I used to help a foster dad with his. For about 8 months. Which one, he asked, meaning which bike? She told him. Nodded slowly with the approval of a man for whom mechanical knowledge was a genuine currency. You want to take a look at it? He said. I don't want to break something that isn't mine, she said. Not going to break anything, he said. It's already broken. I could use an extra set of hands. She looked at the bike. She looked at her hands. She said, okay. That was the beginning of the arrangement that became her work on the property. Not official at first, just incremental. She helped in the workshop. She turned out to have a mechanical instinct that surprised even Big Roy, who was not easily surprised. And within 2 weeks, she was handling basic repairs on her own. Roy's periodic oversight and the particular satisfaction of someone who has found a thing they're genuinely good at and has not had that experience often enough. Marcus paid her. Not a lot enough. And the first time he handed her an envelope, she held it without opening it and said, "This is real." "Yes," he said. "I mean, this is actual money that I earned." "Yes," he said again, with the same patience. She opened the envelope. She counted it. She looked up at him. "Thank you," she said. She said it like it cost her something, which it did, because Lily Carter had not said thank you to someone for something real in a very long time, and the word was heavy in her mouth in a way that was not unpleasant. "You're good at this," Marcus said. "In case nobody's said that to you recently." She looked back at the envelope. "Not recently," she said. "Consider it said," he said, and walked away. She was doing well. That was the thing that made what happened next so brutal, not just in terms of the timing, but in terms of what it meant. She was doing well. She had slept 4 consecutive nights without waking up calculating exits. She had eaten regular meals. She had learned the names of 11 people on the property and the specific ways each of them communicated Big Roy's grunts, Sandra's brisk efficiency, a teenager named Leo, who was someone's nephew, and followed Lily around the workshop with the focused attention of a kid who had decided she was interesting and was not going to pretend otherwise. She was building something. Slowly, carefully, with both hands and full attention, the way you build anything that matters when you know what it costs for it to fall. She was building when the car pulled up. It was a Wednesday morning and Lily was in the workshop with Roy, working through a clutch assembly that had given both of them considerable trouble. And Sandra appeared in the workshop doorway and said, the clipped way, Sandra said everything. "There's someone at the gate asking for you." Lily looked up. She had that instinct. She always had the animal alert, the calculation beginning before she'd consciously started it. "Who?" she said. "Woman," Sandra said her name is Diane Mercer. "She's with the state." And there it was. The thing Lily had been waiting for. The thing she had always known was coming. The thing that proved that nothing good was ever free, that the price was always exactly as high as you couldn't afford it, that the world did not give you a warm room and a job and people who knew your name without eventually sending the bill. She set down the clutch assembly very carefully. She stood up. She said, "I'll handle it." "You want someone to come with you?" Roy said. "No," she said, "old reflex, I'll handle it." She walked to the gate alone. Diane Mercer was 53 years old with The specific look of a person who wore authority as a garment, neatly, deliberately, making sure it was visible. She was in professional clothes that were slightly too formal for a Wednesday morning visit, which meant she had dressed for impact. She had a folder in her hand, which meant documentation. She had a car with a state agency parking tag visible, which meant she was official enough to want to be seen as official. She looked at Lily the way Lily had been looked at by people like Diane Mercer her entire childhood, with a mixture of concern and assessment that had nothing behind it that was genuinely personal. Lily was a case number to this woman. She had always been a case number to women like this. "Lily Carter," Diane said. "Yes," Lily said. "My name is Diane Mercer. I'm a caseworker with the Oregon Department of Human Services. Been made aware that you've taken up residence at this location, and I'm here to conduct a welfare check and make sure you're in a safe and appropriate living situation." Lily looked at her. She kept her face completely still. "I'm 19, Lily said. "I'm an adult." "You are," Diane said pleasantly. "Had. But I have some concerns about the environment you're living in and the individuals you're associating with, and it's my job to make sure." "I don't fall under your jurisdiction," Lily said. "I haven't been a ward of the state for over a year." "You're right," Diane said. "But there are circumstances under which adult protective services can be involved when we have reason to believe a vulnerable person." "I am not vulnerable," Lily said. The words came out harder than she intended. She pulled them back, regulated. "I have a job. I have housing. I have people I trust around me. I appreciate your concern, but I don't need this visit. May I speak with whoever is in charge of this property?" Diane said. "You can speak with me," Lily said. "I'm the one you came to see." Diane looked at her with a patience that was not actually patience. It was the expression of someone who had decided on a course of action before leaving their office that morning and was simply managing the steps between deciding and doing. "Lily," she said with a careful softness that Lily recognized immediately as the kind of softness that was actually controlled, dressed up in concern, "I've been reviewing your file. I know what you've been through, and I want you to know that I'm not here to cause you trouble. I'm here because I care about your welfare." Something clicked into place in Lily's chest. She knew this woman, not personally. She had never seen this specific face before. She knew this voice, this cadence, this particular construction of concern that was designed to make you feel seen while actually making you feel small. She had heard it in offices and hallways and courtrooms in variations for years. She had heard it from people who had looked at her file and made their decision before they met her. She had reported abuse from a foster home once when she was 15. She had sat in an office not unlike one this woman probably occupied, and she had told a person in a position of authority exactly what was happening to her and to two other kids in that home. That person had noted it and nodded and said they would look into it. And then 3 weeks later, Lily had been moved to a different placement with no explanation. The abusive home had kept running for another 8 months before someone else made another report that was impossible to ignore. She didn't know if this woman was connected to that office. She didn't know if this woman had been the person who dismissed her report. The feeling was the same, and the feeling was never wrong. "I'd like you to leave," Lily said. "I understand you feel that way," Diane said. "But I have a responsibility." "You have a piece of paper that says you can be here," Lily said. "You don't have a piece of paper that says I have to talk to you. I'm asking you to leave." Something moved in Diane's face just for a moment. The careful pleasantness slipped, and underneath it was something that looked a great deal like irritation. She reset it fast, but Lily had seen it. "I'll need to file a report," Diane said. "File it," Lily said. "I hope you have a good day." She turned around and walked back through the gate and closed it behind her. Her hands were shaking. She stood just into the gate with her back to the street and her hands flat against the cold metal, and she breathed carefully in, out, and told herself that this was manageable, that this was just a person, that she had dealt with people like this before and survived. She hadn't survived the ones like this when she was alone. She had survived in spite of them, moving away when they applied pressure, becoming invisible when they reached for her. This time she was not invisible. She had a location. She had a name. She had a file. And whatever was in that file, Diane Mercer had already read it. She heard footsteps behind her and turned. Marcus was standing 10 feet away. Behind him, slightly further back, was Sandra. And Carla. How long were you standing there? Lily said. Long enough, Marcus said. I handled it, she said. I know you did, he said. He was watching her face. He said carefully, who is she? Caseworker, Lily said. She says she's doing a welfare check. She has my file, she paused. Marcus, she knows I'm here. She knows my name, my history. She's going to file a report and she's going to use whatever is in that file to say that this isn't a safe situation for me. On what grounds? Sandra said sharply. On the grounds that this is a Hells Angels property and I'm a person with a documented history of being failed by systems, and therefore I must be incapable of choosing my own life, Lily said. The anger in those words surprised her, not because she didn't feel it, but because she hadn't realized how much of it she had stored up, how many years of it were in there, how badly it had wanted to come out. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, come inside. I'm fine. I know you're fine, he said. Come inside anyway, because we need to talk about this, and I'd rather do it sitting down. She followed him in. Victoria was on the phone. When they entered, she had been more mobile with each day, the leg in a brace now, moving carefully. She looked up when she saw Lily's face and said something brief into the phone and ended the call. Tell me, she said. Lily told her. All of it, the car, the folder, the parking tag, the specifics of what Diane had said and how she had said it, the moment when the pleasantness had slipped. She told it the way she told everything clearly, in order, without unnecessary emotion, except that somewhere around the middle of it, her voice went tight in a way she couldn't fully control. She stopped for a moment and pressed her lips together and managed it. Victoria and Marcus exchanged a look across the room, the kind of look that happens between two people who have had years of practice communicating without words, the kind that carries more information than most conversations. We have a lawyer, Victoria said. Her name is Ruth. She's been with the club for 15 years, and she's very good at this specific kind of thing. Can't afford a lawyer, Lily said immediately. Nobody asked you to, Marcus said. She's our lawyer. She handles things that affect our people. He said it simply, without weight, but the word landed with weight anyway. Our people. Lily heard it. She looked at Marcus Carter, and he met her look, and he didn't blink, and she understood that he had not used that word accidentally. Tell you something first, Lily said. Okay, Marcus said, before we talk to any lawyer, before we talk about what comes next. She was choosing her words with the specific care of someone who has kept a thing contained for a long time and is only now deciding to let it out. Diane Mercer or someone from her office. I don't know if it was her specifically, but when I was 15, I reported abuse at a foster placement. I reported it properly. I told someone in authority. I told them exactly what was happening, and it was ignored. The report was ignored, and I was moved, and the home kept running. The room was completely quiet. If this woman is connected to that office, if she was involved in what happened, then this isn't just a welfare check, Lily said. She's not here because she's worried about me. She's here because I know something that would be very inconvenient for someone. Victoria's jaw was set in a way Lily had never quite seen before. The iron that she'd first seen on the road, that Victoria used to manage pain, she was using it now, but for something different, something that looked like contained fury. You're sure? Victoria said. Sure that my report was ignored, Lily said. I'm sure that home ran for 8 more months. I'm not sure yet if she was the one who ignored it. But the way she looked at me, she paused. She's afraid of something, I might say. Just don't know what it is yet. Marcus picked up his phone. Ruth, he said, when it connected. Cancel whatever you have this afternoon. We have a situation. A pause while he listened. No, not business, a kid. He glanced at Lily. She's 19. She's one of ours. And someone from the state just showed up at the gate, and I think they made a very significant mistake coming here. He listened today, he said. As soon as you can get here, he ended the call. He looked at Lily. She'll be here in 2 hours, he said. Lily nodded. She was very still. She was doing what she always did when things became serious, going quiet, going internal, running everything through the careful mechanism of herself. But something was different in the running of it this time. Something had changed in the machinery. She was not running it alone. There were people in the room with her, and they were not leaving. And they had not flinched when she told them the hard thing. And Marcus Carter had said she's one of ours to a lawyer he trusted. And what that meant, what all of it meant, was still more than Lily could hold all at once. But she was going to try. She had been trying to hold things alone for 3 years. The practice she needed now was different. The practice she needed was the one she had never had, the one that involved letting other people carry some of the weight. Victoria looked at her from across the room. Whatever she came here to do, Victoria said quietly, she doesn't know who she's dealing with. Lily looked at her. Neither do I, Lily said. Not completely. Not yet, no, Victoria said, but you're about to find out. The thing was, for the first time in a long time, maybe the first time ever, Lily was not afraid of what she was going to find. She was ready. Ruth Nakamura arrived at 1:47 in the afternoon, 13 minutes ahead of when Marcus had estimated. Victoria later said was entirely consistent with everything she knew about Ruth, that the woman treated lateness as a personal affront and had never in 15 years arrived at anything less than early. She was compact, 50-something, with the specific energy of a person who processed information very fast and had very little patience for anything that slowed that process down. She came through the door with a leather satchel over one shoulder and a cup of coffee in her hand, and she looked at Lily immediately, not past her, not at Marcus first, not at Victoria, at Lily, directly the way a doctor looks at the patient before they look at the chart. You're Lily, she said. Yes, Lily said. Tell me everything, Ruth said. Order. Don't skip the feelings, they matter, but anchor everything in specifics, dates if you have them, names if you have them, exact words if you remember them. Can you do that? Lily looked at her. Yes, good. Ruth sat down, opened the satchel, pulled out a legal pad. Go. So Lily talked. She talked for 40 minutes without stopping, and what surprised her, what she would think about later, in the quiet of her room, was how much she remembered. She had spent 3 years burying things, compressing them down into the minimum necessary to survive, and now she found that the compression had preserved them. The way things preserved in cold storage come out intact. The names of the foster homes, the dates of placements, approximate but close, the name of the caseworker she had spoken to at 15, whose name was not Diane Mercer, but whose office was the same office Diane Mercer now worked in. The specific words she had used when she made the report. The specific response she had received. The 8 months the home had continued operating. The 2 other children who had still been inside it. She said all of it. Flatly, precisely, without decoration. Ruth wrote and occasionally stopped her to ask a clarifying question, not invasive questions, not questions that made Lily feel like she was being assessed, but the questions of a professional who was building something and needed the right materials. When Lily finished, Ruth set down her pen. She looked at her legal pad for a moment. Then she looked up. I want to ask you something, she said, and I need a direct answer. Okay, Lily said. The home that was reported. The one that ran for 8 more months after your report. Do you know the name of the family? Lily said the name. Ruth was still for a moment, completely still. Then she said, very quietly, to no one in particular, there it is. What? Victoria said. Ruth looked at Marcus. Something passed between them, quick, wordless, the kind of exchange that happens when 2 people who have known each other a long time recognize something simultaneously. That home, Ruth said carefully, was connected to a licensing dispute that went through family court in this county 3 years ago. I was on the periphery of it, different case, same orbit. The foster parent lost their license eventually, but the timeline of the revocation was, she paused, it was later than it should have been, significantly later. The reason it was later had to do with who was reviewing the incoming complaints and what was happening to them before they reached anyone with actual authority to act. Lily said nothing. She was watching Ruth the way she watched everything that mattered, with complete attention, taking it all in. Diane Mercer, Lily said. I don't know that yet, Ruth said, but I intend to find out by tomorrow morning. She picked up her pen again. Here is what I do know. What she did this morning, coming to this property, asking to speak with you specifically, framing it as a welfare check that has a legal structure to it, and inside that structure there are very precise boundaries. She can express concern, she cannot compel, she cannot remove. You are an adult. The grounds for Adult Protective Services intervention are specific and require documentation of vulnerability that I promise you she does not have, because if she had it, she would have led with it. She looked at Lily steadily. She came here to see you, to get a look at you, to determine whether you knew what you knew and whether you were in a position to say it. She was threat assessing me, Lily said. Yes, Ruth said, which means she already knows what she's exposed to. She's not worried about your welfare. She's worried about your memory. Ruth closed the legal pad. She made a mistake coming here. She gave us information we didn't have before, that she knows who you are and where you are, which means she's been monitoring your situation, which opens questions about why. Marcus said from across the room, what do we do? Two things, Ruth said. First, I file a formal records request by end of business today for Lily's complete case history, every report, every placement note, every flag, everything. That request will be visible to anyone in that office who's watching, which will tell us something about how they respond. She looked at Lily. Second, and this is your choice entirely, Lily. No pressure from anyone in this room. There is a legal avenue here. Documentation shows what I think it shows. If there is evidence that your report was deliberately buried, there are people who would want to hear that story, and there are official mechanisms to pursue it. Lily said, what kind of people? A state oversight board, Ruth said. Possibly a journalist. Possibly a DA's office, depending on what the documentation shows. The room was very quiet. You're talking about going public, Lily said. Talking about the option, Ruth said. It's yours. I'm not recommending it. I'm not discouraging it. I'm telling you it exists. Lily looked at her hands. She had grease under her fingernails from the workshop that morning. She hadn't had a chance to fully clean up before Diane Mercer arrived at the gate. She looked at the grease and thought about what it represented, what it had taken to earn it, the specific long road that had brought her from under a highway bridge in a rainstorm to a room with a locked door and work that was hers, and people who showed up when things got hard. She thought about the two other children in that house, the ones she had tried to protect when she was 15 and alone, and had nothing but a report and a hope that the system would do what systems were supposed to do. She thought about them being there for 8 more months after she had spoken. Tell me what I need to do, she said. Ruth looked at her for a moment. She said, I need you to be sure. I'm sure, Lily said. This will not be quiet, Ruth said. If we do this, it will become known that you're doing it. It will put you in a position where you are visible, genuinely visible, and you have told Marcus that visibility is something you have spent a long time avoiding. I know, Lily said, there may be pushback. Not physical, I won't allow anything to get to that point, and neither will the people in this room, but bureaucratic, procedural, reputational. They will look at your history and try to frame it as instability. They will use your years on the street as evidence that you're not credible. I know, Lily said again. Her voice was steady, steadier than she felt, but that had always been the mechanism, voice first, feeling second. And you still want to do this, Ruth said. I want to do this, Lily said, because there might be kids in that system right now, or in systems like it, who are making the same report I made and having it buried by the same people. And if I don't say anything, I'm doing to them what that caseworker did to me. The room was completely still. Ruth looked at Lily for a long moment. She had been a lawyer for 22 years. She had been in many rooms with many people who said they wanted to fight something, and she had developed, over those 22 years, a reasonably accurate internal sense of which ones actually would when the time came. She was looking at one who would. Okay, Ruth said. She opened the satchel again. Let's get to work. The records request went in at 4:53 that afternoon. By 6 o'clock, Ruth had preliminary documentation on the licensing history of the foster home. Lily had reported not everything. The full records would take days, but enough to see the shape of it. The report Lily had filed at 15 was in the system. The date was there. The case number was there. And beside it, in the processing log, was the name of the caseworker who had received it and the notation that had been made at the time. Ruth called Lily into the room where she'd been working and showed her the screen. Lily read the notation. It said complaint reviewed. Inconclusive. No action at this time. Beneath it, a signature. The name above the signature was not Diane Mercer. It was a different name, a name Lily didn't recognize. But below it, in the review chain, in the section that listed the supervising caseworker who had signed off on the classification, was a second name. Lily read it. She read it twice. She looked at Ruth. Ruth said quietly, she didn't take the report. She signed off on burying it. She was the supervisor, Lily said. She was the supervisor, Ruth confirmed. Lily sat back. She put her hands flat on her thighs and she breathed and she looked at the ceiling and she thought about being 15 years old in an office, telling an adult in authority what was happening, using every word she had, being as clear as she knew how to be, and going back to that house afterward because there was nowhere else to go, and waiting and nothing happening. She thought about the two other kids. She thought about Diane Mercer at the gate that morning with her folder and her pleasant voice and her careful managed concern. She came here to find out how much I knew, Lily said. Yes, Ruth said, because if I went public with what I know, she's not just a caseworker who made a procedural mistake. She's a supervisor who actively buried a child abuse complaint and allowed that home to continue operating. Yes, Ruth said. That's not a career embarrassment, Lily said. That's criminal liability. Ruth said nothing, which was its own kind of confirmation. Lily was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What happens now?" Now, Ruth said, "I make some calls. I have a contact at the Oregon DHS Oversight Office who has been looking at irregularities in this specific regional caseload for about 18 months. I have a journalist at the Oregonian who has been working on a piece about systemic failures in Oregon's foster care placement review process." She paused. "And I have a judge who listens to me, who owes me one, and who does not like what he's going to see when I show him these documents." "How long?" Lily said. "A week," Ruth said. "Maybe 2. Mercer will almost certainly try to move before then. She'll file her welfare report. She'll try to establish a record of concern about your living situation. She'll try to create paperwork that makes it look like she's acting in good faith." Ruth met Lily's eyes directly. "We need to be ready to move when she does. That means I need you to stay visible. Don't run. I know that's your instinct. I know what I'm asking. But if you disappear, she wins by default. And everything you just told me becomes a story with no ending." Lily thought about the 3 rules she had lived by for 3 years. She thought about how many times those rules had kept her safe. She thought about what Victoria had said: surviving and living are 2 different things. "I won't run," she said. She said it like a decision because it was. She went to the workshop after dinner and she worked on the bike she and Roy had been finishing. And she worked with the concentrated physical focus of someone who needs to be in their body for a while instead of their head. Roy worked beside her and didn't ask any questions, which was one of the things she had come to appreciate about him, his precision about when silence was the right thing and when it wasn't. This was a silence night. He knew it. She was in the workshop at 9:15 when Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Mercer filed this afternoon," he said. Lily set down her wrench. She had been expecting it, but expecting something didn't make the arrival of it any less real. "What did she file?" she said. "Formal welfare concern report," Marcus said, "citing the living environment as potentially inappropriate and associated with criminal organization activity. She's requesting a formal review of your housing situation." He paused. "Ruth's already on it. She filed a counter notice within an hour. But Lily, there's going to be a hearing. A formal hearing in front of a judge. 10 days, 10 days. Lily picked up her wrench. She set it back down. She looked at her hands. "They're going to ask me to speak," she said. "Ruth says, you'll have the opportunity to make a statement," Marcus said. "She says the documentation she has will do most of the work." But he stopped. He looked at her with the direct, steady look he had. "Person is not documentation. You being there, saying what you know, in your own words that matters. Ruth says it could be the difference." Lily said nothing. "I know what I'm asking," Marcus said. "And I'm not asking it the way you think I am. Not asking you to do this for us, for the property, for the club. I'm asking because if you don't say it, those words don't get said. You're the only one who has them." She looked at him. "What if I can't?" she said. It was the first time she had said those words, those specific words, in that order to anyone in a very long time. "Maybe ever." "Then you can't," Marcus said, "and we find another way." "But Lily, I've watched you for 2 weeks. I've watched how you work and how you listen and how you handle things that would make other people fold. You're not someone who can't. You're someone who hasn't yet." She went to see Victoria that night. She knocked on the door, and Victoria said, "Come in," and Lily came in and sat in the chair that had become, over the past 2 weeks, quietly and without anyone naming it, her chair. Victoria looked at her face and said nothing for a moment, which meant she was reading it. Scared, Victoria said. Lily said, no hesitation. Good, Victoria said. Good, Lily repeated flatly. That's your response. Scared means you understand what's at stake, Victoria said. Scared means you're paying attention. I'm worried about people who walk into hard things without being scared. That's not courage. That's either stupidity or numbness, and you're neither. She looked at Lily steadily. What you're going to do is courage, which is scared and going anyway. Lily looked at the collection of road pins on the mantelpiece. Don't know how to talk in front of a courtroom, she said. You talked to me on a road in the rain while I was bleeding out under a motorcycle, Victoria said. You were clear. You were direct. You were focused on what needed to happen. That's all a courtroom is. Someone who needs to hear something and you saying it. The judge isn't pinned under a motorcycle, Lily said. Sure, Victoria said. And there was enough dry humor in it that something shifted in Lily's chest just slightly, just enough to let air in. She almost smiled, almost. Tell me what to say, Lily said. I'm not going to tell you what to say, Victoria said, because what you say needs to be yours. Anything I put in your mouth, they can take apart. What comes from you, from what you actually know and actually live, that's harder to dismantle. She paused. But I'll sit with you while you figure it out, if that helps. It helps, Lily said. So they sat. For 2 hours that night, and for an hour the next morning, and for pieces of evenings across the next several days, Lily talked and Victoria listened, and occasionally asked a question. And what emerged from that process was not a prepared statement, it was something more than that. It was the story of a girl that nobody had ever asked to hear in full, laid out piece by piece in the specific order of how it had actually happened, and the telling of it did something to Lily that she couldn't have predicted, made her less afraid. Not unafraid, she was still afraid. But the fear changed shape, became something she could see clearly instead of something that lived in the peripheral dark of her. And things you can see clearly are things you can face. Ruth called on the 7th day. She called Marcus first and then Lily. And she was brief and specific in the way she was always brief and specific. The Oregonian piece is going to run, she said, day after tomorrow. It's about systemic failures in the regional placement review process, and Mercer's name is in it. Not prominently, it's one case among several, but it's there. Lily absorbed that. How does that affect the hearing? Changes the political atmosphere around it, Ruth said. Judge hearing a welfare concern case about a homeless girl living with a motorcycle club is one thing. Judge hearing that same case 2 days after a newspaper story about systemic failures in the same office that filed the complaint, that's a different calculation. Will she try to pull the complaint? Lily said. She might, Ruth said. She does, we let her. The documents don't disappear. The oversight inquiry is already open, regardless of what happens in the hearing. But if she pulls it, Lily said, then I don't get to speak. Pause. Correct, Ruth said. Lily said, then I want to be in that courtroom before she has the chance to pull it. Another pause. Lily, I know what I said. I know what you told me about the timeline. I want to be in that courtroom on the record before she can make the complaint go away and take the platform with it. She was very still, and her voice was very even. Can you make that happen? Ruth was quiet for 3 seconds. I can file for an emergency hearing date. Given the documentation I now have, there's a reasonable argument for expedited review. Do it, Lily said. Lily, once we're in that room, there's no... I know, Lily said. Do it. The hearing was set for Thursday. Night before, Lily sat in the workshop alone. Roy had offered to stay. He'd set it in his way, which was standing in the doorway and not leaving, and she had told him she was okay. And he had nodded once and gone, because he also understood the distinction between needing someone present and needing to be alone. And he was good at reading which was which. She sat in the workshop for a long time. She thought about the rules she had lived by. She thought about the night, under the bridge, the crash, the weight of the pipe in her hands. She thought about Victoria's voice, in the dark, I can see you. Honey, and how those 5 words had cracked something open in her that had stayed cracked, that had let other things in. The food, the room, the work, the people. She thought about being 15 years old and telling the truth and not being heard. She thought about doing it again, in 12 hours, in a room where it was possible, not guaranteed, but possible that this time would be different. She thought about the 2 other children. She picked up her wrench. She worked on the bike until her hands stopped shaking. The courtroom was smaller than she'd expected. She didn't know what she had expected, something more formal, maybe more imposing, the physical embodiment of a system that had shaped her life for years. But it was a small room with fluorescent lights and wooden benches and a judge who looked like someone's grandfather and who read documents with his reading glasses at the end of his nose. Diane Mercer was already there when Lily arrived. She was at a table on the other side of the room with a man in a suit who was her department's legal representative. And she looked up when Lily walked in. And for a moment, just a moment, something happened in her face. It was recognition. But underneath it was something else. Fear. She was afraid of what Lily was about to say. Lily saw it, filed it, and sat down. Ruth was beside her. On the bench behind her, she could feel without turning around the presence of Marcus and Victoria and Carla and Sandra. She had told them they didn't need to come. All four of them had said some variation of "we know" and "come anyway." She hadn't argued. The judge came in. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. He read through the complaint documentation for what felt like a long time and was probably 5 minutes. He looked over his glasses at Diane Mercer's table. He said, "The filing here is a welfare concern regarding an adult resident at a private property. Counsel, is it your position that this adult lacks the capacity to make decisions regarding her own housing?" The man in the suit said carefully, "Our position is that the environment presents elevated risk factors, Your Honor. Given..." "Read the filing," the judge said. He looked at Ruth. "Ms. Nakamura, your counter notice references evidentiary materials you describe as significantly relevant to the motivations behind this complaint. Read your summary. I'd like to hear the full account." Ruth stood. She was very calm. She laid it out the way she always laid things out, in order, in specifics, without drama, but without minimizing. She presented the records request documentation. She presented the processing log from 4 years ago with its notation and its signature and the supervising name above it. She presented the timeline showing the 8 months between Lily's report and the eventual revocation of the foster home's license. She sat down. The judge was quiet. Diane Mercer's lawyer started to say something. The judge held up a hand and he stopped. The judge looked at Lily. "Ms. Carter," he said, "you have the opportunity to make a statement. You are not required to. But if you wish to speak, this is your time." Lily stood up. She stood up the way she had gotten up from under that bridge on the night of the crash, before a conscious decision, moved by something older and more fundamental than decision. She stood up and she looked at the room, and she breathed once, all the way in and all the way out. She had spent 3 years making herself invisible. She let herself be visible. "My name is Lily Carter," she said. "I'm 19 years old. I aged out of Oregon's foster care system 14 months ago with $40 in a trash bag. Spent 3 years for that in 3 different placements, and I want to tell you about one of them." Her voice was even. She had practiced it being even, and it was. But it was not empty. It was everything but empty. Carried 4 years of wing had. It carried 4 years of waiting in it. It carried the weight of a report that had been written carefully by a 15-year-old who had believed, despite everything, that someone would listen. She told it all. She told it the way Victoria had listened to her tell it, and the way that telling had given it shape and order and dignity. She said the names. She said the dates. She said the specific words she had used when she was 15, sitting in an office, trying to make an adult understand what was happening to her. She said what had happened after, or rather, what had not happened, and for how long it had not happened, and what that not happening had meant for her and for 2 other children whose names she knew. She said that she had come to a property that was warm and safe and full of people who had looked at her and seen a person rather than a case number, that this woman standing across the room had come to that property not out of concern for her welfare, but out of concern for what Lily might say in exactly this moment. She said, "I am standing here today because, for the first time in my life, I have people around me who made it possible to stand here. Not because I couldn't stand on my own. I have been standing on my own since I was 8 years old, and I know exactly how to do it. Because they stood beside me, I am standing in front of you, instead of 3 miles away where it would be safer and quieter, and nobody would have to hear this." She stopped. She had said everything. The room was completely quiet. The judge looked at her for a long moment over the top of his reading glasses. Then he looked at Diane Mercer. And the look on his face was not the look of a man who had not understood. It was the look of a man who had understood very completely. Diane Mercer's lawyer started to speak. The judge held up the same hand and he stopped again. And this time he did not lower it, said very quietly to Diane Mercer directly, "Ma'am, I'm going to recommend that your department's legal counsel advise you very carefully about your next steps in this matter. I am going to refer these documents to the State Oversight Board today, not next week, today, before I leave this building. I am going to tell you that the complaint you filed this morning, which I suspect you filed hoping to move faster than the documentation could catch you, is denied." Diane Mercer's face did not crumble. People like her didn't crumble in public, but it went gray and still, and the careful pleasantness left it completely. "The case," the judge said, "is dismissed." Ruth put her hand on Lily's arm. Lily sat down. She sat down because her legs needed to. Behind her, she heard Victoria make a sound, small, controlled, the sound of someone releasing something they had been holding with considerable tension. Marcus said nothing. She felt him behind her, the specific presence of him, the weight of his attention. She stared at the table in front of her and breathed. Ruth leaned close and said quietly, "You did it." Lily said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "We did it." And that distinction, the word "we" in her mouth, sitting there naturally, without cost, without the sense that she was giving something away by using it, was maybe the most significant thing that had happened in that room. More significant than the dismissal. More significant than Diane Mercer's gray, still face, because Lily Carter had spent 3 years without a "we." And now she had one. And she knew, with the flat certainty she brought to things she understood all the way through, that she was not going to let go of it. Had fought too hard to find it. She was going to hold on. The dismissal was on a Thursday. By Friday morning, Lily was back in the workshop. Roy came in at 7:30 and found her already there, already working, hands deep in the engine, a bike that had been waiting on the lift for a week. Stood in the doorway for a moment, took in the scene, and said nothing. Poured himself a coffee from the battered machine in the corner, poured a second one, and set it on the workbench 2 feet from where Lily was working. She looked at the cup. She looked at him. He had already turned back to his own bench. She picked up the cup. This was how things were in the workshop. This was the language Roy had taught her. Without teaching it, the language of presence without pressure, of being alongside someone without making an event of it. She had learned it from him the same way she had learned the mechanical things, by watching, by doing, by gradually understanding that some forms of care were quieter than words and no less real. She drank the coffee and worked on the engine and let the morning happen around her. The Oregonian piece ran that same Friday. Ruth had sent her the link. Lily had a phone now, a prepaid one that Marcus had handed to her 3 weeks ago without ceremony, saying for when you need to reach someone, and walking away before she could argue, and she read the article at the workbench during the half hour she had for lunch. She read it twice. Her name was in it once, in a sentence that described her as a former foster youth whose complaint was suppressed in 2021. The rest of the piece was broader 7 other cases, a pattern of procedural irregularities across the regional office, interviews with 2 former caseworkers who had spoken on condition of anonymity. Diane Mercer's name appeared 4 times. Lily set down her phone and looked at the engine in front of her and thought about being 15 and sitting in that office and using every word she had. She thought about those words existing now in a newspaper that hundreds of thousands of people would read. She thought about what that meant. She wasn't sure yet, felt too large to hold all at once. She kept it in the periphery, acknowledged, but not yet fully approached, and went back to work. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A woman named Patricia called the property phone. Ruth had listed the property as a contact point in the legal filings, which meant it was now in the public record, which meant people who had read the article and recognized something in it could, they were determined enough, find a way to reach out. Patricia, 41 years old, and had aged out of the Oregon foster system 22 years ago, and she had spent 12 of those years trying to get someone to look at the records from her own placement. She had read the article that morning and started calling numbers until she got to one that a real person answered. Sandra answered. Sandra, who had no patience for inefficiency and considerable patience for people in genuine need, listened to the entire story and then said, Hold on, and walked across the property with the phone in her hand until she found Lily. Someone who wants to talk to you, Sandra said, and held out the phone. Lily wiped her hands on a rag. She took the phone. Patricia talked for 8 minutes. Lily listened. She didn't say much. She asked 2 or 3 questions, specific ones, dates and names, and which office, and she listened to the answers. As Patricia finished, she said, "Can I call you back? I want to talk to someone first, and then I want to call you back." "You're not going to call back," Patricia said. Not hostile, just the flat expectation of someone who had learned what happened when she trusted. "I am," Lily said. "I will call you back today, before 5 o'clock. Pause. "Okay," Patricia said. Lily hung up and stood there for a moment. She went and found Ruth. Ruth was in the room she had been using as a temporary office for the past 10 days, surrounded by documentation and 2 laptop screens and a coffee cup that had been empty for at least an hour. She looked up when Lily knocked. "I got a call," Lily said, "from a woman who read the article. She has her own situation." She paused. "Thinks she has her own documentation." Ruth looked at her. "This is going to happen again," Lily said. "Now that the article is out, people are going to call probably," Ruth said. "We need something," Lily said. "Some way to handle it. Some actual mechanism, not just me taking calls on a property phone." She looked at Ruth steadily. "Told her I'd call her back before 5. What do I tell her?" Ruth studied her for a moment. She set down her pen. She said, "What do you want to tell her?" "I want to tell her there's someone who will listen to her and help her figure out what to do with what she knows," Lily said. "I want to tell her that what she experienced wasn't her fault, and her voice counts even if someone previously told her otherwise." She stopped. "I want to tell her what nobody told me." Ruth was quiet for a moment. "That's not a phone call," Ruth said. "That's an organization." Lily said nothing. "You know that," Ruth said. "You've been thinking about this for longer than today." Lily looked at the wall. The honest answer was, yes, she had been thinking about it since the courthouse, since she had sat back down with the word "we" in her mouth, since she had felt the specific weight of what it meant to not be alone inside something difficult. She had been thinking about it the way she thought about things she wasn't sure she was allowed to want. She had been thinking about what it would mean to build deliberately, structurally, the thing that had saved her. Not the specific people, not this specific property, but the principle of it, that a person in the worst circumstances of their life, alone and invisible and without resources, could encounter something that saw them and did not look away, and that this encounter could change the entire trajectory of what came next. She had been thinking about how to make that encounter available to more people. She had not said it out loud until now. "Tell me what it would take," she said. Ruth picked up her pen again. "Sit down," she said, "and let's actually talk about this." They talked for 2 hours. Ruth asked the practical questions: legal structure, funding, scope, liability, oversight, and Lily answered what she could and asked back what she didn't know. The conversation had the specific energy of 2 people who are both thinking fast and building something in real time. Ruth had done nonprofit work in her earlier career. She knew the architecture. She could see where the pieces went. Lily knew what the need looked like from inside it. She knew it with the completeness of lived experience, which was a kind of knowledge that no architecture could substitute for. Together they had something. At 4:58, Lily called Patricia back. She told her there wasn't a formal organization yet. She was honest about that, because honesty was the only currency she had learned to fully trust. She told her what there was: a lawyer who knew the system and a documentation trail that was already opening doors, and a person on the other end of the phone who had been in the same place Patricia was describing and had found a way through it. She told her that wasn't nothing. She told her she could help Patricia access her records and understand what options existed, and that she could connect her with Ruth. Patricia was quiet for a moment after Lily finished. Then she said, "How old did you say you were?" 19, Lily said. Another pause. "You sound like someone who's been doing this for 20 years. Been preparing for it my whole life," Lily said. "Just didn't know that's what I was doing." She went to Victoria that evening. She sat in the chair that was her chair, and she told Victoria everything: the call from Patricia, the conversation with Ruth, the 2 hours of building something in a room that smelled like old coffee and legal documents. She told it the way she told Victoria things now, not as a report, not as a managed information transfer, but as the actual experience of it, with the parts that scared her included. Victoria listened. She didn't interrupt. When Lily finished, she sat with it for a moment. Then she said, "What are you going to call it?" Lily blinked. She had not expected that to be the first question. "Don't know yet," she said. "Think about it," Victoria said. "The name matters. It needs to say what it is without explaining it." Lily thought about it. She thought about the night under the bridge. She thought about the bridge itself, the specific geography of it, the way it had been shelter and boundary, and the dividing line between the world that was happening and the world she'd had been locked out of. She thought about what bridges actually were, what they connected, the two sides of something too wide to cross alone. "Bridge foundation," she said. Victoria looked at her. Something moved across her face, something deep and quiet, like a tide shifting. "That's it," Victoria said. "Yeah," Lily said, "that's it." Marcus said yes before Lily finished asking. She had rehearsed how to make the case. She had thought about framing it, about addressing his concerns about liability and association and the practical realities of launching something like this from a starting point of essentially nothing, and she had worked out the points in order in her head. She walked into the room where Marcus was sitting with a cup of coffee and reading something, and she said, "I want to start an organization." And he looked up and said, "Okay, what do you need?" She stared at him. "I had an argument prepared," she said. "I could tell," he said. "You want to give it anyway?" "No," she said. "But you don't know what I'm asking yet." "I know enough," he said. "Ruth told me you'd been in her office for 2 hours. Ruth doesn't spend 2 hours on things that don't have substance." He set down his coffee. "And I know you. Which means I know that if you're asking for something, you've already thought about it more carefully than most people would." He looked at her directly. "What do you need?" She told him. "Operational space on the property, at least initially. Access to Ruth's expertise on the legal and structural side. Some initial funding to file for nonprofit status and build the basic infrastructure. Connections the kind Marcus had, the kind that came from decades of knowing people across a city in ways that formal networks never quite replicated." She told him what it was for. For people like Prihad. Not just for people like Patricia, but for anyone who had aged out of the system alone, had been failed by the mechanisms that were supposed to protect them, who needed something more specific than a shelter bed and more human than a case number. Housing navigation, legal support access, education and employment pathways, phone number that a real person answered, and community. That was the part she said last and said most carefully because it was the hardest to explain in practical terms and the most important. "People need somewhere that knows their name," she said. "Not their file number, their name. And that's still there tomorrow. That's still there in a month." Marcus looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "How much to start?" She told him the number Ruth had estimated for the initial filing and first 6 months of basic operation. He nodded once. "Done," he said. She opened her mouth. "Don't argue with me." She closed her mouth. "This is not charity," he said. "I want to be clear about that. This is investment. In something I believe in, run by someone I believe in." He looked at her with the directness that had characterized every interaction she had ever had with him. "You came out of a rainstorm and saved my wife's life. You did it because something in you refused to walk past a person in need, even when walking past would have been safer. That thing in you, that is what this organization is going to be built on. I don't invest in things I don't believe in." Lily sat with that. She sat with it the way she sat with big things, carefully, giving it room. "Thank you," she said. "You keep saying that to me," he said. "You keep doing things that deserve it," she said. He almost smiled. "Almost. Get to work," he said. She got to work. The next several months were the most concentrated period of effort Lily had experienced in a life that had required considerable effort. She worked on the bridge foundation, the way she worked on engines systematically, with attention to how each part connected to every other part, with the understanding that a beautiful component that didn't integrate with the system was useless, and that what mattered was the whole thing running. Ruth handled the legal structure. Sandra, whose organizational precision turned out to be exactly what the administrative side needed, handled the operational architecture. Carla, who knew more people in more corners of Portland than almost anyone, handled outreach. Big Roy, in a contribution that surprised everyone including Roy, turned out to have contacts in 3 of the city's trade programs, through which he connected Lily to workforce development resources she wouldn't have found on her own for months. Lily handled everything else. She worked 16-hour days without noticing. Because the work didn't feel like work the way the word work usually felt, it felt like purpose, which is a different thing entirely, and purpose doesn't exhaust you the way obligation does. She took calls from people like Patricia. She took calls from people, nothing like Patricia men, older women, people with grown-up in the system, and were watching their own kids navigate the same failures with the specific dread of someone who knows exactly how it ends. She listened to all of them. She asked the specific questions. She connected what she heard to what Ruth could do and what resources existed and what gaps needed to be filled. She was filling gaps. She had always been filling gaps in herself and her own survival. Now she was filling them in something larger, and the scale of it didn't frighten her the way she might have expected. Focused her. Leo, the teenager who had followed her around the workshop with such devoted attention, started coming to the foundation's preliminary space, a room on the property that had been cleared out and furnished with second-hand but functional equipment every day after school. He didn't ask if he could help. He just showed up and started doing things, and it turned out he had a facility for technology that nobody had given him a context for before. Within 3 weeks, he was managing the organization's basic digital infrastructure with the quiet competence of someone who had found their thing. Lily looked at him one afternoon, really looked, in the way she had not had the time to look, and saw something in his face that she recognized. The focus. The way he moved through the work like it was the first time something had asked enough of him. She said, "You know what you're doing." He shrugged. "Just like how it works. That's how it starts," she said. He looked at her. "Is that how it started for you? With the bikes?" She thought about it. "With whatever I needed to figure out to survive," she said. Bikes were just the first thing that didn't feel like surviving. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Is that what this is? The foundation? Not surviving?" Lily looked at the room around them, at the second-hand furniture and the whiteboard with its lists and arrows and the stack of case files that had grown from 1 Patricia to 47 in 3 months. She thought about the phone she answered every morning. She thought about the people on the other end of it. "This is the opposite of surviving," she said. "This is the thing you build after you figure out you're going to make it." The Bridge Foundation received its official nonprofit status on a Tuesday in late autumn, 7 months after Lily had sat in Ruth's temporary office and said the words out loud for the first time. Ruth called her when the confirmation came through, and Lily was in the workshop with Roy. She held the phone against her ear and heard Ruth say, "It's done," and she said, "Okay," and hung up and stood there for a moment with the wrench in her other hand. Roy looked up. "Something good?" he said. "Yeah," she said. He nodded. He went back to his work. She went back to hers. That was the morning. That evening was different. Victoria had organized something Lily had been aware of planning happening around her in the way that planning had always happened in that community, which was thoroughly and without unnecessary announcement, and at 6 o'clock, people started gathering in the main space of the property. Not a formal event, not speeches or presentations. Just people, food, noise, the particular warmth of a community that has something to celebrate and knows how to celebrate it. Lily stood at the edge of it for a moment, the way she had stood at the edge of things her whole life. Victoria appeared beside her. "Come in," Victoria said. "I'm in," Lily said. "You're at the edge," Victoria said. "Come further in." Lily looked at her. "It's yours," Victoria said. "All of this. These people are here because of something you did. Come further in." Lily breathed. She walked further in. Marcus found her an hour later. He was holding 2 bottles of something, and he handed her one and said, 47 cases in 3 months. "We need more capacity," Lily said immediately. "The intake process is backing up." "I know," he said. "We'll talk about expansion funding next week." Leo is good with the systems, but he needs someone who can help him with the database architecture before it gets too big to fix. "I know," Marcus said. "I'm talking to someone." "And the housing navigation piece." "Lily," he said. She stopped. "Tonight," he said, "is not about what comes next. Tonight is about what happened." He looked at her with the steady, direct look that she had come to understand was his most genuine form of expression, the look he used when something mattered enough to warrant his full face. 47 people reached out to you in 3 months. 47 people who had stopped expecting the system to hear them. And you heard them, and you connected them to what they needed. And in at least 6 of those cases, something changed that would not have changed without you. Lily said nothing. That happened, he said. It happened because a 19-year-old girl came out from under a bridge in the rain and decided to do the hard thing. He paused. I want you to let that be something. Just tonight. She looked at the room. At Roy talking to someone she didn't recognize. Sandra standing with 2 women from a women's shelter partnership they'd established the month before. Carla laughing at something on the other side of the room. Leo in the corner, looking at his phone, probably monitoring something she had not told him he needed to monitor, but that he was monitoring anyway. Victoria talking to Patricia, who had driven up from where she lived south of the city, who had connected with Ruth, and whose case was now in active review, who was standing in a room full of people who knew something about what her life had felt like from the inside. Lily looked at all of it. She let it be something. The first anniversary of the foundation passed in the way that real work always passes, not with fanfare, but with the accumulation of details, each one small, each one necessary. By that point, they had served 163 people. They had established housing support partnerships with 4 organizations across Portland. They had a workforce development pipeline that had placed 21 young adults in employment or training programs. They had 3 part-time staff members, 2 of whom were themselves alumni of the foster care system. Patricia was one of them. She had come in 3 months earlier and said she wanted to work there. And Lily had said, what is your availability? And Patricia had said, all of it, whatever you need. Lily had said, okay, and they had worked out the details, and Patricia had shown up the next Monday morning with coffee for everyone and had not stopped since. Lily watched Patricia on the phone with a new intake, a young man, 17, in emergency housing, nowhere to go in 3 weeks when the housing expired, and she listened to the specific way Patricia talked to him. Steady, specific, not promising what couldn't be promised, not minimizing what was real, just present with it, holding the weight of it alongside him rather than trying to take it away. She was good. She had been good at this since the first day, which made sense because she was doing with others what she had needed done for herself, and that kind of knowing went all the way down. Lily thought about the word Ruth had used in the early days organization. She had thought about it that way in the beginning because that was the accurate word, the structural word, but it wasn't the right word anymore. Not for what she saw when she looked around the space that had once been a single cleared room on a motorcycle club property. The right word was the one she had been afraid to use for a long time. The right word was community. Not family, not exactly. Not the way the word family implied biology or proximity or things that were given rather than built. Community was built. Community was chosen. Community was the thing you created when you decided that the people around you mattered and you acted on that decision consistently over time. She had been doing that. She was still doing it. Every call answered, every case file opened, every person who walked through the door and sat down and told their story and was heard, all of it was an act of community being built, one day at a time, with both hands. The twist came on a Thursday afternoon in late spring. She was at her desk. She had a desk now, a real one, with her name on a small card in a holder that Leo had made with a label maker as a joke, and that had turned out to be not entirely a joke when Ruth walked in with a look on her face that Lily had learned to read. Not bad news, not exactly good news either. Information of consequence. I need to tell you something, Ruth said. Okay, Lily said. The State Oversight Board issued their report this morning, Ruth said. From the investigation that opened after the hearing, Lily was still. Diane Mercer, Ruth said, has resigned from her position, effective immediately. The report recommends disciplinary review for 4 other staff members in the regional office. And she paused. The report specifically recommends a systemic review of case processing protocols across all regional offices, with particular attention to the handling of complaints from minors in placement. Lily sat with that. Because of what I said at the hearing, she said. Because of what you said at the hearing, Ruth confirmed. Your testimony is cited twice in the report by name. Lily looked at her desk. at the stack of intake files, the small card with her name in it in the label maker holder, the phone that rang every day with voices which she had learned to recognize as variations of a voice she had been carrying inside herself for a very long time. "That's not enough," she said. Ruth looked at her. "No," she said. "It's not. The protocols need to change," Lily said. "The people need to change. The review needs to have teeth." The report recommending a review and an actual overhaul of how complaints are handled are two different things. "Yes," Ruth said, "they are." "What would it take to push for the second one?" Ruth sat down. She folded her hands. She said, "Legislative advocacy. Someone who knows the system from inside it and can speak to the specific structural failures in terms that legislators can act on. Someone who has the credibility of lived experience and the credibility of documented outcomes." She looked at Lily over the top of her folded hands. "Someone like the executive director of a nonprofit that has served nearly 200 people in its first year and has a measurable record of results." Lily said nothing. "You would need to go to Salem," Ruth said. "Testify before a committee, probably more than once." "Testified before a judge," Lily said. "A legislative committee is different," Ruth said. "More people, more cameras, more visibility." The old reflex moved through her, the specific trained response to the word visibility that had been built into her over years of needing to be unseen. She felt it. She acknowledged it. She let it pass through without acting on it. "Set it up," she said. Ruth looked at her for a moment. "You are 19 years old," Ruth said. "I know how old I am," Lily said. "I'm not saying that as a limitation," Ruth said. "I'm saying it because the person you're becoming at 19 is something I want you to understand. Most people take 30 years to become who you are right now." Lily looked at her steadily. "I had a compressed timeline," she said. Ruth's mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was the closest Lily had ever seen Ruth get to one in a serious conversation. "Yes," Ruth said, "you did." She testified in Salem 6 weeks later. She sat before a 7-member legislative committee, and she told the story not the way she had told it at the hearing, not the compressed version that served a specific legal purpose, but the full version, the one with the weight of 19 years in it. She told it with the documentation Ruth had prepared, with the outcome data from the foundation's first year, with the specific legislative language of the reforms she was recommending. She told it the way a person tells something they have earned the right to tell. The committee members listened. Some of them were visibly moved. One of them asked a question that was not really a question, but a statement of recognition that what Lily was describing was a failure, not of individual caseworkers, but of architecture, the systems designed in ways that made certain outcomes probable, regardless of individual good intent. "Yes," Lily said, "that's exactly what I'm describing." After the testimony, in the hallway, a woman approached her. She was in her 60s, professionally dressed, with the bearing of someone who had spent a long time in these halls. She introduced herself as the chair of a state commission on youth welfare. She said, "I've been working on this issue for 11 years. Lily said, "I know. I've read your commission's reports." The woman looked at her with an expression that was the specific combination of surprise and respect that Lily was beginning to recognize the one she received from people who had not expected her to have done the reading, who had brought their assumptions about who she was and had those assumptions quietly dismantled. "I'd like to meet with you," the woman said, formally. "Think we have things to talk about." "I think we do too," Lily said. She flew back to Portland that evening. Marcus picked her up from the airport. She had argued against this, said she could take the bus, and he had said, "I'll be there at 6:15, and that had been the end of the discussion. He was there at 6:15. She got in the car. They drove in silence for a while. Then Marcus said, "How did it go?" "Good," she said. "Good as in fine, or good as in something happened?" "Good as in I think something is going to change," she said. "Not tomorrow, but eventually." He nodded. "Victoria wants to know if you're coming for dinner," he said. "She's planning to go home," she said. "She knows," he said. "She wants to know anyway." Lily looked out the window at the city moving past. Portland in the evening, lit and moving. The streets she had walked for 3 years with her chin down and her rules holding her together. She looked at those streets and felt something she had no old word for and was still working on finding the new one. She said, "Yeah, I'll come for dinner." She went for dinner. They sat around the table, Marcus, Victoria, Carla, Sandra, Roy, Leo. Lily and they ate. They talked. Sometime in the middle of it, Lily looked around the table and thought about the last time she had sat at a table with people who knew her name. She could not find it. There had not been one. Not really. Not like this. Victoria caught her looking. She met Lily's eyes across the table. She said nothing. She didn't need to. 6 months after Salem, the legislative committee passed 3 of the 5 reforms Lily had recommended. The other 2 were in committee. Ruth said the other 2 would come. Believed her. The Bridge Foundation served its 300th person on a Wednesday morning. Intake was a 16-year-old boy, 2 years away from aging out, who had been referred by a school counselor. He sat in the chair across from Lily's desk and looked at everything in the room except her. And she recognized that the not looking, the studied avoidance of eye contact, that meant he was deciding whether this was safe, and she waited until he was ready. He eventually looked at her. She said, "What's your name?" He told her. She said, "Tell me what's going on. I'll listen." Talked. She listened. When he finished, she did not tell him it was going to be okay. She never said that, because she had been told that too many times by people who had no grounds for the promise and had resented every instance of it. She said, "Here's what we can do. Right now, today. Here's what we can work toward. And you're not doing either one alone." He looked at her. "Why do you care?" he said. "You don't know me." She looked at him directly. "You're right," she said. "Don't know you yet, but I'm going to." She paused. And I know something about being in the place you're in right now, about feeling like the world has a script for your life, and the script doesn't go anywhere good. And I know something about what it looks like when that changes. "What does it look like?" he said. Lily thought about a night in the rain, about a crash and a pipe and a torn jacket, about a woman who had looked at her in the dark and said 5 words that had cracked everything open, about a room with a door that locked from the inside, about a workshop and a wrench and a cup of coffee set 2 feet away without comment, about a courtroom and a judge and a word that had sat in her mouth like something she had been waiting to taste for years, about a table where people knew her name. She thought about all of it. She said, "It looks like right now. You here in this chair. That's what it looks like when it starts to change." The boy looked at her for a long time. Then, slowly, the tension in his shoulders moved, just slightly, just enough. Lily Carter, the girl nobody saw, the girl who had lived by 3 rules and a torn jacket and an absolute refusal to be visible, looked at him and saw him the way she had once needed to be seen, completely and without flinching. Understood that this was the work, that this would always be the work, that every person who walked through that door was a continuation of the same story that had started under a bridge in the rain when a woman said, "I can see you, honey," and changed the entire direction of what was possible. She had been saved by someone who refused to look away. Now she was the one who refused, and she was going to keep refusing for every invisible person, every forgotten child, every voice that had been quieted by systems that were supposed to protect it for as long as she had breath and words and the capacity to sit across a desk from someone and say, "I hear you, see you, you are not alone in this." That was the promise she made the night she walked out of a hospital room and said "we" for the first time. She had kept it every day since. She would keep it every day that followed, because the girl nobody saw had learned the most important truth of her life, not from a classroom, not from a system, not from any of the structures that had failed her, but from a rainstorm and a stranger, and the terrible, necessary act of stopping when everything in her said, "Keep walking." The truth was this: being seen is not luck. Being seen is not random. Being seen is what happens when someone decides that you are worth the cost of looking. Lily Carter had been worth it. She had always been worth it. Now she made sure every single day, without exception, that 300 people, and counting, knew that they were too.